5 minutes past. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the launch of the CEP's Industrial Policy Task Force. We are absolutely thrilled to have a great program this morning, and the program starts with a welcome address by the chairman of the CEP's board, Joaquin Almunia. And Joaquin, I give you the floor immediately, and you will hear from me throughout the meeting and the morning. So Almunia, off to you for a great start.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you very much to all the participants in this launch of the task force on the new industrial strategy, an ambitious project that will keep many of you busy during the next 6 months under the direction of Andrea, that is the director of the task force as a senior fellow here at CEPS. In 6 months, the task force wants to come up with recommendations to help the Commission to further develop the industrial strategy that was defined in the communication published in March. But days after the publication of the communication, the pandemic came and has created new challenges, has created new obstacles, but also has given the opportunity of having new opportunities, new challenges, and new resources, such as the ones provided by the EU Next Generation. And the task force will want to develop the priorities as defined by the EU authorities and to develop the orientations written down in the communication of the Commission, but taking into account the new context. We hope that growth will come back soon with us, but we know that to build a resilient and competitive economy, the things have to change. We cannot have a mood of business as usual. A lot of new challenges are before us, and we need to imagine how a new industrial strategy will be one of the most important factors or elements to find this sustainable and inclusive growth for the next years and decades. Industrial policy will be extremely important, but not as we knew in the past, the old industrial policy of picking the winners, be it companies or sectors. Now we have priorities clearly defined, the digital transition, the energy transition, and we have structural changes in our economic systems, and we need to be able to give a new orientation to the paths of the growth strategies in our economies. The instruments must change. The instruments cannot be based on protectionist trends. The instruments need to be inspired by clear competition rules, maybe new rules or maybe new interpretation of the rules, but avoiding protectionism and trying to encourage as much as possible innovation and to help structural changes in our economies. And this is the mandate of this task force, to give clarity where still some objectives of the definition of some instruments is blurred. I very much hope that during the next 6 months, under the directorate of Andrea, with all your contribution, this task force will be really useful, not only for the Commission, that by definition the Commission is our first interlocutor, but for the public responsibilities, for the public authorities, and also for the private sector. I think resources will be there, but how to use these resources, what are the real priorities, what kind of instruments, is the task of this task force under the directories of Andrea. I can help as chairman of the board, and all the members of the board will be extremely interested in your work. Andrea will come to the next meeting of our board in December to give us information, what are the details of the purpose of this task force, And for sure, the debates today will be extremely useful for all of us. And I thank you very much again, your participation, your contribution. And indeed, Andrea, before giving you the floor, I very much thank Thierry Breton as commissioner and my former colleague when he was Minister of Finance and I was Commissioner for Economic Affairs. I thank him very, very much for this speech, introductory speech of the meeting. And for sure, we want to deliver to Thierry and to all the other members of the College of Commissioners with the recommendations that hopefully will come up for this work during the next months. Thank you very much and good work.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. It's a very encouraging start also from your side. We have obviously a very important challenge ahead of us. And we have, as I will explain later in the morning, we have decided to approach this task force as a whole of SEPs exercise, meaning that it's not just me and the units that I lead on global governance, regulation, innovation, and the digital economy. They will be involved in this exercise, but also many of the other units and research units at SEPs that cover basically the whole spectrum of the industrial strategy for Europe. And we're also happy that we will have several, let's say, external advisors and participants to our task force meetings. Today, it's a good example. We have upcoming a video from Thierry Breton, as Joaquin was mentioning. We will also have the possibility of organizing a sort of a fireside chat after that video between 6 outstanding panelists that I will introduce after the video, and the Director General for Internal Market, Industry, SMEs, and Entrepreneurship of the European Commission, Kerstin Jorna, that we are extremely happy to have again at SEPS, as she came for a fantastic webinar before the summer, and we are extremely happy to have her again. And we value her competence and knowledge in this field in really substantially, and we are super thrilled by the possibility of having this exchange with her. So without further ado, what I propose to do is that we watch the video by Thierry Breton, and then we'll sit down and comment on the content of the video with our panelists and with Kerstin. So please, I will ask for the video to be launched. Thank you. Yeah, we don't hear the audio, I guess, so you might want to.
Cher Monsieur Almunia, surtout très cher Joachim, Mesdames et Messieurs, je vous remercie tout d'abord pour votre invitation à cet événement qui porte sur un sujet absolument essentiel au futur de l'Europe. The crisis we are going through now in the second wave is unlike any other in our recent history. It is also a major accelerator of transformation of our society, our economy, but also our industry. Indeed, the crisis has confirmed the importance of being more resilient collective, leading the green and digital transition, and reducing our geopolitical and economic dependency. Because rebuilding tomorrow's industry is not just about subsidizing sectors. It is also, and above all, about investing in the future to emerge from the crisis as a stronger, more resilient Europe. We want to be the world-leading industrial continent and generate the highest added value and quality jobs. And in this context, I welcome the agreement reached on November 10 between the Parliament and the Council of Europe's next long-term budget and next generation EU, the temporary recovery instrument. What do I see a springboard for our company. So first look at Brexit to understand the attractiveness of our single market. Now, with the crisis, we also need to recognize the single market as the ultimate engine for economic recovery. The first wave of the pandemic made clear that when a country closes its borders, there are immediate knock-on effects on everyone in the value chain. When the single market does not work, we all pay the price. North and south, east and west, small and big companies, manufacturing and industries, and economies that are more dependent on services. Countries also that rely more on export, and also those that are imported. So let's learn the lesson and unleash the full potential of our single market. Let's start in the largest domestic market in the world and create robust EU value chains across our industrial ecosystem. Now let me turn to the twin green and digital transition. In September, we increased our decarbonization ambition and proposed a 55% target of emission reductions by 2030 in order to reach carbon neutrality by 2050. This will require a profound transformation of our industry, significant investments, and the creation of new markets. We are committed to supporting this transformation. Let me mention some of our key actions. Investments in decarbonization and emission reductions from energy-intensive industries will be a priority, as well as the deployment of innovative low-emission technology. To ensure that EU companies can compete on a level playing field, we propose a carbon border adjustment mechanism by the summer 2021. And we will support the creation of demand and markets for clean, low-carbon, energy-efficient, and circular products with a new product policy that introduces sustainability criteria for the goods sold in Europe. The twin of the Green Deal, the digital decade, will be the key pillars of our industrial strategy. The COVID-19 pandemic underlined the need to accelerate digital transition in Europe. It triggered unprecedented demand for digital technologies and infrastructure. And it exposed the EU's vulnerability and dependencies on other regions for its key digital capacity. What should we conclude from this? We need to invest in the digital technologies that will underpin our sovereignty and our industrial future. The global race for technological power. Europe will lead if we seize the opportunity of data, microelectronics, and connectivity. They will act as enablers for the investment of the industry of tomorrow in fields such as artificial intelligence, supercomputers, and microprocessors. And of course, there will be crucial pillars for building an effective European cyber chip. To achieve this ambition, we need a smart combination of public and private investments. And we need clear rules. Those who know me are well aware that I am not a fan of regulating for the sake of it. But our industry and businesses need clarity and predictability, starting with clear rules on data and on digital services and also markets. Ladies and gentlemen, in our March strategy, we adopted a new innovative industrial ecosystem approach. Because when we talk about industry, we are not only talking about large manufacturing companies, we are talking about real ecosystem of researchers, manufacturers, SMEs, and also a set of suppliers and service providers, increasingly interlinked, increasingly European. In the context of the update of our industrial policy announced by President von der Leyen, we are working on a mapping for each ecosystem, tourism, mobility, retail, etc., to establish a complete diagnosis of the entire value and supply chain to identify the needs and mobilize tools where they are most needed. This mapping or matrix will enable us to target our collective efforts where they are needed most with our full toolbox: financing, regulatory framework, trade and competition policies, partnerships and transversal initiatives such as alliances, which each benefit several industrial ecosystems at the same time. I am firmly convinced that such inclusive approach that places our industry and our single market at the center will be key to our recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, I often hear voices calling for making Europe more resilient, increasing our industrial leadership, and of course creating quality jobs. But do we have the courage to do what it takes? To learn all the lessons from the crisis, to react to the geopolitical and economic trends around us, to show audacity and assertiveness, looking after our citizens' interests. The task ahead of us may seem daunting. We need to ensure our competitiveness, our technological advantage in fields such as data, processors, connectivity, batteries. We need to reskill our workforce and facilitate labor mobility, coupled with upward wage convergence. We need to ensure our security of supply of essential commodities, such as raw materials, of course, pharmaceutical ingredients, and many other strategic areas. We need to remain the main destination for foreign direct investment, but with increased controls, so that foreign companies that want to access our market do so on an equal footing with our European companies. And we need to be better prepared for the next crisis, which, whatever its nature, will require swift decisions being taken to common European interests. All of this was true before the Great crisis, and it is truer now than ever, regardless of changes in leadership of that country. Ladies and gentlemen, making this all happen will require a collective effort by the EU institutions, member states, regions, industry, social partners, researchers, and all relevant stakeholders. The reflections stemming from your task force will be a very welcome input to our work. Je vous remercie.
Well, I hope you got the content, the main content, and I hope that the Commissioner Breton will not take it personally if we will say that his speech was not very clear, but that's not his fault. Meaning, it's we had a problem with the audio quality. So what we will do is we will send you a link and post the video by Thierry Breton so that you can watch it later with with a better audio quality. So apologies for this. The panelists that I'm about to invite to comment on the video have had the possibility of watching the video before, so this probably solves some of the problems in this respect, and I hope they got the otherwise extremely clear messages that Commissioner Breton has sent us in terms of how he sees the industrial strategy for Europe going forward. So in our roster of panelists today, we start from Ilham Kadri. Ilham is the CEO of Solvay, and we have and it's something that applies to all 6 panelists. They are not invited here because they are directly involved with the task force. They're not invited here because they are sponsoring the task force. They are handpicked. We have really looked for the speakers that we wanted to have here because they represent, in our opinion, a perfect mix of backgrounds, competences, the interests they represent, and more generally, the knowledge that they can bring to the table. And this is perfectly applicable to Ilham. Ilham, after a long career in business, she has become the CEO of a company that is involved and operating in one of the key sectors that have been targeted by the industrial strategy already with a strategy for chemicals. But she is also the CEO of a company that she has then oriented increasingly towards sustainability, which is one of the key words, but not only a keyword, one of the key targets and objectives of the industrial strategy for Europe. So to Ilham, we've asked a double effort, and also to the other speakers. We've asked Ilham to be so good as to condense her comments on Breton's speech in 1 minute. And then she will have more time later to express her thoughts in more detail. But Ilham, I give you 1 minute now to react, so that in particular, Kerstin, you and I can collect all the instant views and comments from each and every panelist, and she will be able to react to you. So I already took a minute myself. I will not take a minute between speakers, promised. But over to you. We are very happy to have you here, Ilham.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yeah. So very glad to be handpicked and be part of a prestigious panel today. 3 takeaways for me from Thierry's Breton remarks, which I share at a personal level, but also as a leader of major industrial and chemical specialty company rooted in Europe. He said COVID-19 is unprecedented, and indeed is an accelerator of trends that were already existing there. And it's a great opportunity for companies, for leaders, for the citizen we are, to just use it as an accelerator of those trends. Second, he said that the EU needs to act, and has done so with the new industrial policy based on green, digital, and resilient Europe with an inclusive approach. And I applaud him, including SMEs and companies who are very necessary for us because we work as part of an ecosystem. And third, importantly, is that the single market was and has been the Europe best asset, and will also be a major importance for the recovery, including indeed reskilling the workforce towards probably more digital. So listen, at Solvay, we fully support the EU industrial policy strategy as it identifies this transition towards climate neutrality and digital leadership as key priorities to enhance the European competitiveness. We have identified similar priorities for the future success of our industrial chemical business. At Solvay, we call it Solvay One Planet. It's our roadmap towards a sustainable circular future. We focus on areas where our innovation and sustainable solutions have the biggest positive impact. We call it Pillar Climate, Resources and Better Life. And for example, thanks to the Solvay partnership with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we aim at accelerating Solvay's contribution to the circular economy. We just announced an alliance because we cannot do it alone with Veolia in recycling batteries and bringing them back into a new life. And that's important. So I see the circular economy as being the right path forward, and we integrate it into our operations, from reduction of waste and recycling the waste. And if you recycle the waste, it's not a waste anymore, into a bioproduct or energy generations, right? Our raw materials are more renewable, more recycled resources, and our business solutions are enabling our customers to become more circular. So, you know, this is not the first time the industrial strategy, you know, there is an industrial strategy from the European Commission, and the European Commission is launching, and the ones from the past did unfortunately not deliver as wished or expected. So in our views, and taking into account that I'm going to finish the minute, I would like to single out 2 elements to be considered in the future: the use of the important projects of common European interest, the IPCI-like framework, which is very important. The alliance of batteries is one of those. We need more. We need hydrogen-like of frameworks, etc. And second is really to have KPIs to track them. It's extremely important. On the IPCI is a true catalyst for private investments and public finance to fund large-scale innovation, to bring big, large, small companies together in an ecosystem, to de-risk the investments and avoid more market failures maybe. And second, we really need to watch the KPIs and how the money is being used, because some member of states are experiencing budgetary difficulties, and obviously they may tend to favor their national champion first. So we need to ensure that the EU level, the money which is being reinvested is well invested in technologies which matter, which are sustainable, which are going to create a job, and jobs not only today, tomorrow, but the day after. So I believe that a set of quantifiable, measurable KPIs should be used to track progress and benchmark the European performance against other world region. And this would make it possible for the European Commission to correct and adapt the course where needed at a member state level. And for this strategy finally to be successful, we need a pragmatic approach focused on outcomes and performance drivers based on available data from trusted resources. So I'll pause here, Andrea, to leave the room to others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilham. It's also one of the aspects that I'm sure will emerge throughout the morning and also in the work of the task force, and how to track progress, how to monitor that the strategy is delivering over time. And you also made a perfect bridge, since I didn't know of the alliance, but the fact that Andrew comes after you is then a perfect continuation of our debate. So Andrew, CEO of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Andrew Morlett, can I ask you to give us your thoughts in your 1 minute slot?
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. And I'll keep my initial comments at a very high level, because I think we've got plenty of opportunity to get into the details. First off, I really welcome Thierry Breton's presentation and many of the points that he makes. What I would say is that Europe has been one of the world leaders in the development and adoption of the circular economy thinking, and as progressed as it is, I think today, as we sit here today, the full benefits of this approach are not appreciated and being applied into industrial strategy thinking. For most people, the circular economy is really seen as a waste and recycling agenda. How do we actually keep materials in the system at the end of use? But in actual fact, it's a much bigger idea than that. It really does base itself on 3 principles. It is a systems solutions framework that really looks at, by design, how do we eliminate waste and pollution right at the get-go in the conception of new product service systems? How do we keep materials used and in use for much longer, thereby lowering the energy demand of the system, capturing an enormous amount of value by adopting those approaches for repair, remanufacturing, reuse, design for longevity, etc. And thirdly, that the circular economy aims by design to regenerate natural systems where we use land-based products or natural system products, and in particular food. So that is the bigger idea of a circular economy, and it's based increasingly on renewables and renewable energy and materials. And it actually represents a much better future growth opportunity. It represents better growth that is more resilient, distributed, diverse, inclusive, and captures an enormous amount of value that is currently lost through the system. So I would encourage us to really think about the circular economy in those terms, because if we get the industrial policy right, we will be able to release an enormous amount of industrial private sector innovation opportunities and creative value capture that is also enabled by policies that orient investment to the right areas based on the principles of the circular economy, and also invest in infrastructure to help enable the system to work better. So that for us is the bigger idea of the circular economy, and we know from publications, research we've done in the past, it represents a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity, better growth, new jobs, and better societal outcomes, and it represents a competitive advantage for Europe. Thank
you very much, Andrew. I'm sure we will go deeper into these issues on what really is the approach towards the circular economy. Is it just end of life? No, it is an approach that goes from beginning to end and also embraces the distribution of value along the value chain. So I'm sure we will bring this into the deeper debate later on this morning. I will call on Francesca now. Francesca Bria, President of the Italian National Innovation Fund, but also honorary professor at UCL. Francesca has really distinguished herself also as CTO of the city of Barcelona, and now as a young academic and researcher with very innovative ideas on how to empower citizens in the digital society. So Francesca, over to you for your 1 minute, and thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much, Andrea. It's great to be here with you and contribute to this important conversation. So I think that from the Commissioner's word, the EU is setting an ambitious toolbox that have the biggest potential, I think, to reshape the digital global economy as we know it in the past year. And for me, the ambitious goal of the Commission is really to establish a model for European digital sovereignty that doesn't get us trapped between Beijing and Washington. And it is very clear that this also means that Europe cannot be seen anymore as a regulatory superpower only, and that the EU needs to remain relevant as a global economic power through its technological innovation, which, as Commissioner said, means also taking back control of connectivity, data, microprocessors, 5G, and so on. So we need both regulation on one side and industrial strategy, and these two things need to go hand in hand. When we look at data, this is very clear because we need an antitrust shift that restrains the dominance of big tech by linking competition law, privacy, and data. And my question is if the Digital Service Act will move in this direction. It seems to do so, requiring, for instance, gatekeepers to share data with rivals, which means prohibiting the exclusive use of data in platforms, but also making sure that public interest data is available to governments, citizens, and industry throughout Europe. And if this is working, if this is true, I think that this will enable Europe to succeed also in an industrial policy that invests in infrastructures such as the EU European Cloud, DataX, but also in decentralized and privacy-enhancing technologies that can make Europe more competitive in artificial intelligence in our own terms. And finally, I would like to say that I think if Europe really is serious about competing on innovation, we also need an organizational breakthrough. We need to invest more in startups, in scale-ups, in accelerators, in tech transfers throughout Europe, with increased coordination like the European Innovation Council is trying to do, coordinating also with national innovation funds. And probably we should be also more ambitious in setting even new agencies for disruptive innovation, public-private partnership with strategic missions at fully European level, because still we have these institutions that operate mainly at national level.
Thanks, Francesca. Then governance, organizational innovation, policy coherence. Are all messages that I think are quite strong and also help us broaden the picture from the industrial strategy, which is already broad enough, into the overall strategy of the European Commission, which includes the regulation, the reform of competition law, and in particular the Green Deal, that, as we will see, will be part of really front and center addressed by one of our working groups, as you will see later. Now, the Green Deal is also important when it comes to the social dimension of what we call the twin transition. And this is why we're very happy to have with us Montserrat Mir, who is dealing specifically with that sentence that is sometimes added to the Green Deal announcements. So with the just transition, which seems to be like a little add-on, but it's a huge topic. So we're very happy to have Montserrat, who really deals with the just transition on a daily basis. So Montserrat, I will ask you to give us your thoughts in 1 minute. At this moment, you will get a better chance later to express your thoughts in 10 minutes. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to invite me and to have the privilege to share this panel with so relevant speakers, and also I can see with some of the colleagues that we used to work at the ESIR experts group. I want to say that Europe, we will develop probably later on this, Europe needs, especially now in the context of the COVID crisis and the climate crisis, because there is a convergence, we need more jobs, but not only more jobs, we need more quality jobs, because what we have seen is that in this crisis, not all actors, all workers have the same possibility to be protected and to receive kind of support tools to don't lose their jobs. For that reason, I think that the new industrial strategy should be the blueprint for the future-looking roadmap to speed up industrial recovery and avoid irreversible damages in the employment and skills. And also the new strategy needs to strengthen and develop the social dimension, as you say, because the new industrial strategy should guarantee adequate support for quality work environment, good working conditions, and decent work, because it's relevant in the context of Europe that wants to be more social and wants to involve the social pillar in all the domains that the Commission and the Parliament are working, needs to remark this, especially in the most vulnerable regions. The strategy should also contain measures to ensure social protection, key and relevant in this context, for workers in their transition. And finally, it should include more ambitious measures to ensure convergence and solidarity between regions and countries in the EU. We have seen that not the impact of the COVID and of the climate is not the same depending on the region that a European citizen is living, and for that reason, it will be very important to take into account the regional balance in. At the moment that the Europe with this strategy will decide investments and will decide job creation and job promotion through the private and public investment. That is my first
Fantastic,
reaction.
Montse, and also thanks for having me keep the time. And I think we will need to discuss this, and I will encourage you to really spell out your thoughts also in the follow-up discussions on what we could do to strengthen the social dimension of the industrial strategy and the related strategies, including obviously what is presented as the Europe's growth strategy, which is the Green Deal. In terms of industrial strategy, in terms of entrepreneurship, as Francisca before was evoking the term, we have the possibility of having with us today Celine Kaufmann, who has been active in regulatory policy with the OECD for many years, and she now has been appointed as the head of the SME and Entrepreneurship Division of the OECD. So as good friends of Celine, we at SEPS are very happy and congratulate her for this achievement in her career. And we, as in return, ask her for a 1 minute statement of what she thinks could be improved or what are their comments on Thierry Breton's speech. Celine, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Andrea, for the kind words, and good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today. And I think you won't be surprised to hear me say that my key message, obviously, is that we need an industrial policy that puts small and medium-sized enterprises at the heart of recovery and renewal, which is very much actually in line with this week focus of the EU, which is the EU SME Week, because with all the dramatic consequences of this crisis, it also presents us with a lifetime opportunity to actually rethink and redefine the role of business in the industrial transformation. And what the work that we're doing and the evidence that we see shows us is really the importance to move of the SMEs to actually move the EU industrial policy ahead. We know SMEs contribute the bulk of greenhouse gas emissions. They overall lag behind access to digital tools. And if we want to move ahead with the dual green and digital transformation that are the key priorities of the EU industrial policy, SMEs need to be made a full part of the solution and not only remain, the problems. And I believe that the Build Back Better provides a great opportunity for SMEs to be put back at the center. But we know also that SMEs come in all forms and shapes. And so we believe that policies will need to become a bit more refined and pay greater attention to the specific circumstances and the diversity of the business population going forward. And obviously, I'll go into more details into the areas of challenge that we see in terms of putting SMEs back at the center in my 10 minutes. But just in a nutshell, we see a risk with the level of debt that the SMEs have accumulated during the crisis, which will prevent them to invest or to make the necessary investment to transition to greener and to more digital practices. So that's one. The second one is obviously the importance to bridge the gap of digitalization through a broad pact between different actors, not only the public sector, but also big companies, and some that are on the discussion this morning. It was said by Francesca already, but there is a key importance of startup policy that should be put back at the center of that industrial policy. And we need to invest in improving the framework conditions for SMEs, not only at international, national level, but also at the regional level, because we know SMEs are strongly embedded into their direct environment. So I'll stop here and happy to go further when I have my 10 minutes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Celine. And I move directly to Yanis Potočnik, our last speaker in this first round. Yanis, you've been Commissioner for the Environment. You're still very active in the field of sustainability. And what are your reactions to Thierry Breton's speech?
Thank you, Andrea. 3 very quick points and also a question to Kirsten. First, I really liked the address, vision, and also the clarity. I think it's providing an excellent base for a coherent, modern industrial policy based on collective effort around integrated economic ecosystems in Europe. Second, I will be later in my address talking about the role of the importance of natural resource management and circular economy, which was already dealt with in Andrew's comments, for European competitiveness as well for the twin green and digital transition. Natural resources are a kind of bridge between economy and competitiveness on one hand and climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution and health implications on the other. So I do believe there is no doubt that future competitiveness and sustainability efforts to a large extent depend on how efficiently and also sustainably we will manage the natural resources. And third, Green Deal is clearly much needed North Star to implement the North Star. To implement it, we should focus on core drivers and pressures. Market signals are driving our behavior, the behavior of producers and consumers, and Black Fridays will bring us only a digital, but not also a sustainable future. We cannot, on one hand, send signals leading to quantity-driven higher profits, capital returns, and growth, creating socially unjust society and destroying our natural capital, while on the other protect public interest through regulation and public funding. This just creates a lot of confusion through lobbying, bad will, and it will never end up actually in a sustainable world and sustainable production and consumption. So I do believe that we have to fix the compass. So Kirsten, how do you see the importance of the role of natural resource management for European Union competitiveness? And would you agree that more focus, or if I use the words of the Commissioner Breton, courage, would be needed to address the drivers and pressures leading to the challenges we face? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yanis, and also thanks for ending with a question directly to Kirsten, as we are about to give Kirsten the floor. Kirsten, you got many comments, and I hope you took note of them. I know it's a lot that we ask you to do. That's great. I know we're asking you a lot, but we know you can handle it. And I will add the tiny comments before giving you the floor, because you came to visit us at CEPS virtually, obviously, before the summer for a webinar in which you were the keynote speaker. And we already realized at the time how difficult it was to imagine the building back better or any effort in the industrial strategy in the middle of the pandemic. Now we are in the middle of the second wave, and I was wondering whether you think something has changed since then in terms of having to reconsider the ambition of the industrial strategy or the direction of the industrial strategy in light of the enduring pandemic that we are experiencing. So the floor is yours. Feel free to react to all the comments that you've heard and to add any other thought, of course. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrea, and thank you very much to all of you. I honestly and sincerely regret that I have to leave at 11 o'clock because I have another engagement, but I'm looking very much forward to your work also to help us kind of shape our industrial policy, because that's the first comment I want to make. It's not a photo. We're talking about a film here, and it's the film of making Europe's economy fit for the future with everybody. And so your input will be very much appreciated. I will not comment in detail on every, I'll just give you my, listening to all of you to extract. And I mean, if I have to extract one sentence, it's think system. It's not, about like maybe we did policies before, a bit of regulation, a bit of investment, everybody in their silo. It's think system. I'm a big fan of design thinking. I've worked a lot around that. And I think that message, if I listen to you, is really trickling through, that we have to have a holistic approach. And this is really the way the Commissioner set it out, is our industrial policy strategy. It's a holistic economic policy approach for Europe, for the single market. Now, in terms of examples and illustrations, I would like to pick out the alliances a number of you mentioned. We can no longer just have an industrial policy for big industries and an SME policy for smaller companies and a green policy for something else. It needs to come together. And the alliances is just another way to actually deliver that. If you look at the Batteries Alliance, which was mentioned, the Hydrogen Alliance, which was mentioned, the Raw Materials Alliance, it's about bringing together all the actors, ranging from, starting with the innovation part, then the kind of tech transfer, startup, scale up, super important, and then also in the supply chains, in the value chains, the smaller partners, where are the relevant IP? How does that work together with the bigger partners? So in short, what we call the ecosystem. And as you know, we divided up or tried to have a new analytical tool for looking at how our economy works. And this is the industrial ecosystems, which range from tourism, retail, the Commissioner mentioned those two, but also to renewable energies, energy intensive industries, and to look at the interaction inside these ecosystems, because that's the beating heart. It's not the photo, it's the beating heart, and they are the beating hearts, if I may say so, of the economy. And we've seen that very clearly if you look, for example, at the automotive system. It takes thousands of pieces to build a car, but it only takes one not to build the car. And that's a learning we really had from the crisis. There's one point you did not yet pick up from the speech of the Commissioner, which is the matrix thinking. So what we're doing at the moment is actually to look at the 14 ecosystems, and then the matrix part is the different tools, policy tools that we can engage to improve the functioning of the ecosystems. And these tools, they are cluttered into 4 baskets, clustered into 4 baskets. One is the whole financing part. Another one is the regulatory part. The one, I think, Francesca, you said that this was, which was very relevant for us in the past. But then there's also the global value chain part. What about the international integration? Where do our raw materials come from? Where are our future markets? What are the values that we actually handle along these value chains in terms of green, in terms of human rights also. And then there is a fourth basket, which is about the alliances, I mean, the networks. How do we deliver this? And what we're doing now at the moment, and I hope that your work will also provide us insights, is to look at where are the vulnerabilities in the 14 ecosystems and which would be the appropriate policy tools to address them. Do we need, for example, on the microprocessors, an alliance and an IPSE to move this on? We did a kind of dummy exercise with 3 ecosystems, automotive in particular, and construction, to see how this kind of, what insights this provides us. But this will be a very relevant exercise. Also, when I look at the minus 55% goal, now we have to translate that, and this is the climate law, into adaptation of the different regulatory tools that we have. But again, it's important to understand across the ecosystems, which have been the efforts done, what's the capacity to reduce more, where, what is the amount of CO2 that every ecosystem kind of generates, who generates it inside, to really have the best policy tool applied. Again, the ecosystem is, and the matrix, it's an analytical tool, but we think it's the appropriate analytical tool from a system thinking perspective to devise the right policy for the green and digital transition. Also, I want to pick up your point about KPIs. Totally agree with that. This being said, we need more reflection on this. We're not so good at it. I mean, I know because my previous job was on the Juncker plan and then InvestEU, which was also a new and system thinking tool, because rather than regulating public good or giving a grant to pay for the public good, we are actually proposing to co-create the public good, because private projects, we just took part of the risk in it. Private projects that wanted to do public good but could not get the money from the bank because the bank said too risky. InvestEU and the Juncker Fund took part of the risk. And with this part of the risk covered, the companies could go back to the bank and get the money, or the investors, and they could actually, and we got better projects. We got really good projects. We invested to the tune of more than the expected 500 billion in the last 4 years. That was a tremendous success, and it was a way of system thinking, co-working together. So in that context, we've been looking at the KPIs, because obviously it's not only about the quantities, it's about the quality. Now, when you look at KPIs, you come across different types. You come across targets like the 30% climate target, like the 37% target that we will probably have for the recovery and resilience facility. We have now a 10% target for biodiversity. This to you, Janusz, to your question, what do we do about our natural resources? We have a 20% digital target for the recovery and resilience facility. So that's targets. And then you have to, when you have targets, you need accounting. And when you need accounting, you also need reporting. So there is a whole issue to discuss about how we do it in a good way, also for our SMEs. But then there are also indicators, which, for example, we're handling in the digital, the DAISY, which is another way to look at how a policy impact. Generally, the easier thing is to look at input rather than output. It's very difficult to measure output. And I feel that there is still a lot to do. If you look at the investor community, which is more where I come from my previous job, there is a lot of private initiative to develop these output indicators for investors, for those investors who are actually flocking to Europe at the moment, because they don't want only profit, they want also to have a kind of public good share, and with the taxonomy. So that is an area I think we have to look into as well for sustainable investment. How can we kind of mainstream that? Is that a model for public policy making as well, for public budget spending? And then there's yet another strand where we will again be confronted with criteria, which is the green and social bonds. Now, onshore, which is the short-term unemployment backup insurance, I'm really, really proud that this went through. When we started to think about it, we thought, it will take decades. Now all member states have short-term employment, and this is to you, Montserrat, as well. I think this is a tremendous acceleration of policy making and public innovation, actually. So we'll spend 100 billion, which we have to take from the market, in social bonds. It will explode the number of social bonds globally, and we will set a gold standard here. But then again, if you emit social bonds, you have to say that you spent it and how you spent it. Now, it will be easy in the case that, because we're only backing up the short-term insurance systems of the member states, but there is development here, and we have to make sure that it fits with all the rest. And then we have the green bonds. The president said that 30% of the 750 billion will be issued as green bonds, which actually will also explode the number of green bonds available globally. But again, we have to account against it. So on the KPIs, even beyond industrial policy, I really look to academia experts to help us develop that. And to make it even more diverse, I want to say, remind you what we develop under InvestEU, and we're currently working on it, which is sustainability proofing, which is you have to tick one of the sustainability boxes, but on top of it, you have to prove that you're not doing harm to anything else, to another element. And that's sometimes the tension, Janusz, between climate and biodiversity. I'm just making the example from my summer holiday, the little commune in France where I spent my summer. You may not use pesticides to keep the road clear of weeds. So, okay. So what did they do? They bought a huge machine to burn all the weeds. Now, the CO2 emission, I don't want to know about that machine. So that's the tension that we also have to solve. This was my long part on the matrix part. This is my long part on the KPIs. I did say something about the alliances as being kind of the next frontier. And again, here, it's also about creating the public good. But again, we're kind of trial and error. We're having to set it up in an inclusive, transparent way. And again, we need all the actors to help us to do this. On the Hydrogen Alliance, we're almost 900 participants now, ranging from public sector, regions, countries, big companies, small companies, the ones who want to produce hydrogen, the ones who want to transport or store hydrogen, the ones who want to use hydrogen. So it's getting, a marketplace on its own, which again is the system approach. And I'm very hopeful and engaged in making this happen. And then a last point on, my point is really about public sector innovation and how we need you to work with us on this in a system approach. My last point is about the innovation point, Francesca, again. You mentioned the European Innovation Council. And we have the first ever continental public venture fund, which we created, which is the European Innovation Council Fund. I have the privilege of being one of the board members on this council and on this fund. And what we're trying to develop here, it's a pilot phase. It will be scaled up after, but what we're trying to develop here is to do this bridge financing in equity, direct equity, which we never did before. We did indirect equity, but not direct equity, which is also a point, I don't remember who said that, about the liquidity issues of companies and the fact that, by taking Celine on liquidity measures, you charge the balance sheet to a point that maybe, you know, investment is no longer possible because the bank will say, no, not to you. So equity is the only solution. The leaders didn't like it too much, our proposal for a solvency instrument, I regret. But so with the European Innovation Council, at least we're working on the equity side and trying to see how we can add value. It's not about replacing the market or what venture funds as such. And we have an increasingly thriving VC scene in Europe as well. So it's no longer everybody goes to the States. Still many people go, but not all. But what we can add with this kind of public-private fund to the market, and to, again, support and focus the ones that will not get it from anywhere and still are creating a strategic public European good. So these would be my reflections based on your reflections. I'm really thrilled by the debate. Sorry, you're starting. I'm looking very much forward to have the results of all these discussions. Thank you very much.
Dear Kerstin, that was absolutely fantastic. We would keep you for another 6 or 7 hours, but we know you have to go. We will keep you posted on already this morning's debate, because I'm sure that the panelists will react to what you just said, which is a very rich picture of what is in the making. So systems thinking, matrix thinking, policy coherence, use of smart and sustainable indicators to track progress, new and innovative forms of sustaining the economy that are not necessarily copying other models. And so all this is extremely ambitious. We want to support, as I will explain later, this ambition with the whole of CEPS. So we do this for a sense of service. We want to really play the role that a think tank with all these muscles in different sectors and the ability to venture into different sectors of the economy, society, and the environment. We want to use all of this to support the effort of the Commission, because we believe that the time is absolutely essential and that the time is ripe to make this effort together. So we let you go, but don't go too far, because at some point we will need you back and we will report to you on what we have been discussing and developing within the CEPS Task Force on Industrial Policy. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good discussion.
Bye, Kerstin.
Bye-bye.
And we will move now to the second part of our debate. Obviously, you know that you have an Italian moderator today, so the fact that we are 15 minutes behind schedule is actually luxury. I actually thought I would do much worse by now, but at least we managed to have full comments by Kerstin. We now have a session in which I will actually have to enforce the 10 minutes that you have much more strictly than I did for the 1 minute that we had before, because we still have a very full agenda. The other thing I want to say before I give the floor to Ilham, that I saw she had raised her hand during Kerstin's speech, so she might have probably comments on the KPI side. We'll collect them for sure. Is that we have already received a number of questions on the Q&A part of Zoom. You can already consult them. A couple of questions, there's one for Francesca and a couple of questions for Joaquin. You find them partly in the answered questions, because I moved there to the Q&A part. I encourage the participants to continue using the Q&A to ask questions or to place comments. And meanwhile, I will give the floor again for the more structured 10-minute speech to Ilham. And Ilham, don't take it personally if when the 10 minutes are about to expire, I'll start waving my hands with the video. And I will ask then Ilham to take the floor, and thanks again for being with us.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me well? Yeah, looks like it's okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you. That was, you know, a great introduction and engagements with Kerstin. Quickly, before we close the first chapter, Andrea, I mentioned it in the chat, Solvay, together with other companies of the ERTs, the European Roundtable of Industrialists. It's a forum for CEOs and chairs of leading companies of European parentage in the industrial and technological sector, sharing the same value of tolerance, equality, freedom, and openness. So we get together. We also believe in those KPIs, and I think we were already working on scorecards we developed in partnership with a consultancy firm around exactly what Kerstin was talking about. So I think I invite us maybe to not reinvent the wheel, because all companies like us is about having a vision, having a strategy, implementing it and executing it and monitoring the progress through KPIs. So that's our bread and butter. So I wanted just to mention it to the group, and probably you can hand it over to Kirsten. Well, listen, to kick off this second part, I believe that the European industry is truly undergoing a deep transformation. To ensure that our companies stay competitive in global markets, we all must embrace technological change, develop technologies that use less energy, reduce or recycle the waste, avoid obviously pollution, and invest in a workforce with the right skills. And we need new skills, right? Reskilling is important, as was mentioned by Thierry Breton. I'm proud that most of the companies like Solvay, we are very much aware of this gigantic challenge ahead of us. And we know circularity and sustainability are the future. And we see it not as a threat, we see it as an opportunity, right? As I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, Solvay has embraced the Solvay One Planet approach towards sustainability with several ambitious targets, 10 of them. We commit to driving progress across key pillars: climate, resources, and better life. And we pledged actually the reallocation of investments to promote this progress in our portfolio, in our operations, in the workplace. With respect to the climate pillar, for example, not only we pursue what we've done across the years, and we've been around for more than 158 years as a company. Obviously, the chemical industries have been part of the problem, but it's part of the solution. And we are lowering our greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. We joined the Paris Agreement in February and raised the bar again, joining the Science Based Targets Initiative in October. We even declared, for example, the elimination of the use of coal, believe it or not, in the next 10 years. This is the primary energy we've been using since 158 years when we founded this company. And more importantly, the reduced pressure on biodiversity. Concerning resources, our technologies allow us for an increase in water use efficiency. As future generation, I believe, will face water scarcity in many places on the planet. We are committed to accelerating the circular economy and more than double it. Today it represents 7% of our revenues, and we want to more than double it by 2030. And the last but not the least is about the better life. It's about people at the end of the day. And we not only we prioritize safety like any industry would do, but also the promotion of inclusion and diversity. And we put inclusion even before diversity, because you need to have an inclusive environment to listen to the diversity if you have it in the room. If not, it will leave you. So coming back to the European chemical now industry to thrive, and while it undergoes this deep transformation, we are facing electrification, lightweighting, resources efficiency. Digitalization is gonna bring the industry 4.0 and revolutionize our very traditional, maybe sometimes conservative chemical industry. And none of this will be possible without the chemical industry. Obviously, I am biased. I'm a chemist by background, but we call it the mother of all industries. There is virtually not a single product around you: the textile you wear, the smart device you have in your hands, now the screen you look at it, the connectivity, the medicine you take, the COVID-19 tests or vaccines, we all are, hoping for, which is not enabled by chemistry. So while we focus on areas where our innovation and sustainable solution can have the most significant impact, we know that our clients expect the latest technological advance, which is good for the people, the planet, and for the profits. And it's not in contradiction. Profitability is important to make it sustainable. So therefore, we are already working together with different partners to make the transformation happen. In many countries committed to the Green Deal and stricter CO2 emissions targets, upping the need for more environmental friendly vehicles, critical raw material, for example, using electrical lithium-ion batteries. It's important, and not only it's important to produce batteries and localize them in Europe, it's important to recycle them and give them a second life and extract precious metal from them. And that's why we are joining force with Veolia to recover and reuse critical battery metals. Second, we are specializing, for example, in application again like batteries, and bringing that innovation and research and innovation is so important and critical in creating the right chemistry to help power electrical cars. It's one thing to recycle a product at the end of its life. It's so important to start designing the product like a fashion designer would do. It's gonna come to the chemistry and to our industrial products to think circularity and sustainability from day one. And that's why we are reinforced with Saft, Siemens, and other actors, for example, in the battery sector, to really relook at the whole ecosystem. And we joined, obviously, the European Battery Alliance, which is a fabulous, project launched in 2017, aiming to tackle the production. And being competitive is important. And the last example is the hydrogen. It's a huge opportunity. Going from the gray to maybe blue and the green, it's a unique opportunity for Europe, and it's gonna reimagine the cleaner mobility along with the electrical batteries. So we now see the markets of this solution take off as part of the larger trends towards sustainable mobility and energy solution. Solvay has a range of technologies meeting these needs of the hydrogen economy, and it's again an opportunity rather than a threat. So as I mentioned earlier, I see very strong alignments between the sustainability agenda of the leaders of today and the Commission industrial policy. To leave you with, I think, to shift to a sustainable economy and to a totally different way of manufacturing those sustainable solutions will require huge investments. And moreover, the COVID crisis is calling for resilience projects supporting a profound recovery. Whilst we understand that the Next Generation EU Recovery Fund will have a positive spillover effect on the private sector, it would be more effective to have a part of it, right, earmarked directly to the industry in order to give the necessary boost to the economy that the EU is looking for. Second, I think Europe's approach to climate policy needs to take account of the level of ambition of other major world economies. So Europe faces the challenge of greening European production while at the same time avoiding carbon and investment leakage and rising imports of products with a potentially higher carbon footprint. So we are calling for a level playing field. It's so important. And that's why the CBAM, or the Carbon Border Adjustments Mechanism, to help to protect the industry competitiveness in the light of any asymmetric climate ambition between the EU and the localized industrial leaders like us here and the rest of the world is so essential. So to be effective, however, for the chemical industry, CBAM should come as an addition and not as an alternative to the existing carbon leakage measure. And I call on the EU to not replace the free allowances by CBAM, because it would risk deteriorating the competitiveness of the chemical industry. And the last point is the green and digital transition will affect every part of our economy, society, and industry. Europe is playing a catch-up on 5G, 6G. EU is serious about that. It will require new type of job and consequently new skills. And we need just today to start reskilling, upskilling, and learning and relearning new competencies in Europe, because we need badly data scientists. Solvay is not only a chemical company, we are hiring data scientists. We need more digital gurus and millennials in our companies to help us to revolutionize our industries. And I expect that digitization, automation, and advances in AI, artificial intelligence, will demand a shift skill set of my own teams, and therefore this retraining, reskilling is essential for our success. So that's it. I believe that Europe can extend its position in key strategic and innovation sector while successfully achieving the green and digital transformation. And this will involve, in fact, fundamental societal and industrial transformation. And you can count on us to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilham. And that is, I mean, your message is very positive, meaning that very optimistic, meaning that you see the signs of a sort of an industrial renaissance and also the forging of coalitions in Europe, which is very, very encouraging. You also place emphasis on the digital transformation and the digital skills This is a very good bridge for our next speaker, which is Francesca. This time we have reshuffled a little bit the panel, and we have first three speakers, an all-female panel with Francesca and then Montserrat. So I move on to Francesca. Again, I will enforce the 10 minutes this time, Francesca. Over to you for the continuation of your thoughts.
Thank you very much. So I think we should see that the COVID-19 crisis can present us with this historical opportunity to lay the foundation for a renewal of our economies and society, projecting us, as we are saying, into a more sustainable, digital and carbon neutral future. So looking at the future. And today, this means, of course, addressing this twin challenge of environmental protection and sustainable digitization. And I think we can do this by harnessing the European technological sovereignty to accelerate the ecological transition. And we should understand that today, when we talk about technological sovereignty, we also mean political or geopolitical and economic sovereignty. And the technological sovereignty of Europe is, of course, a factor of global competitiveness on which our capacity for sustainable and inclusive growth in the long term, our national security, but also Europe's influence in key sectors depend upon. So digital sovereignty means that as a society, we should be able to set the direction for technological progress, to solve the most pressing social and environmental issues of our times, starting from the climate emergency, but also public healthcare and public education. And as I said before, digital sovereignty also means that Europe cannot be seen only as a regulatory superpower. In a context of growing geopolitical multipolarity, European leadership is increasingly important. And the EU needs to remain relevant as a global economic power through its technological innovation. During this pandemic, we are seeing an increased digitization of many aspects of our life. And digital infrastructures, connectivity, data, and platforms have proven to be critical infrastructures on which essential services of society, such as work, healthcare, food delivery, and education depend upon. However, we also realize how more than ever dependent we are on critical infrastructures owned and controlled by a handful of tech giants, US or China-based, presenting an industrial concentration unheard of in recent history. Just as an example, US tech shares are now more valuable than the entire European stock market for the first time on record. And if 5 companies own the digital economy, can it really work for all of us? This means that we need an holistic economic and industrial policy, as the Commissioner Breton explained, including financing, a regulatory framework, trade and competition policy, and new strategic alliances and projects. This means we need an antitrust policy shift to face this unprecedented corporate monopoly power, and that we need a new digital taxation system at a European level, or OECD level even better, in which large companies pay taxes where they have users and create profit without resorting to tax havens. This digital tax can then be used to have our own resources in Europe to fund the Green Deal and to modernize our economy and society. But let's be clear, we have to face a big industrial challenge to be able to capture and share the economic value produced by digitization. We need a coordinated project of a new industrial strategy at the European level that is very ambitious. One important objective for Europe is how to stay competitive, as it was said before, in the strategic value chain of the future. Electric batteries, renewable energy equipment, hydrogen fuel technologies needed to meet Europe's target of becoming climate neutral by 2050. And where Europe can suffer from critical raw material shortages due to over-reliance on import. This means that we should be able to use the Europe's Recovery Fund in alignment with Europe's new Green Deal and the digital strategy, where public investment will flow into electric batteries and hydrogen, but also in critical tech areas, such as 5G, artificial intelligence, next generation chips, the Pan-European Cloud Computing Initiative Gaia-X, to manage cloud infrastructures in a European way. This is good. Gaia X wants to define an international gold standard for security and sovereignty over data, which are the raw material of the digital economy, which power artificial intelligence systems. So the so-called tech Cold War between the US and China is today centered on technological supremacy and risks creating a global technology industry split with an actual artificial intelligence arm race that may be inevitable. So we're increasingly also seeing strong intervention from the US and Chinese government due to national security concern on one side, but also fierce economic competition to capture the value of this current industrial revolution. And we should predict that the US-China decoupling in strategic technology sectors will move into a broader array of economic activity. So having said that, I think that when we are talking about critical infrastructure for the future, one key focus, of course, should be reconquering the data sovereignty of our citizens, cities, and industries by developing a EU-wide data space with new governance models such as data commons or data trust. Data is the raw material of the current economy, and it should be seen as a critical EU infrastructure. So European governments should enforce rules for how their privacy-conscious citizen data is handled to avoid data being used by digital platforms to spy on, monitor, and manipulate their behaviors. Or the problems associated with this unsustainable business model, such as distraction, misinformation, fake news, the spread of conspiracy theory, but also power imbalances and the concentration of artificial intelligence in private hands will keep growing, and they will eventually hit us badly. The European Union, I think in this respect, I'm positive, it's looking at the relationship between competition law, privacy, and data, and the Digital Service Act is proposing to go in this direction, requiring companies to share data with rivals, that prohibiting the exclusive use of data, and recognizing the public interest of data. So we need a democratization of data, in fact, and I tried to do that when I was a CTO of Barcelona, turning municipal data into public good, co-owned by all citizens, and then opening up this data to startups, to innovators, to companies, to citizens, to create added value in key critical sectors and improve public services and the life of citizens. Obviously, when we talk about digital divide, we do not only mean infrastructures, but also investment in digital skills, human capital, education, research, and science. Without technology transfer, the company capacity for innovation is reduced, as well as productivity and the creation of good quality jobs and new jobs. For this reason, Italy has created its own National Innovation Fund with 1 billion euros to create 1,000 new startups, scale-ups, next generation business accelerator, tech transfer hub, with the aim of intensifying the relationship between science and industry and to grow the innovative industrial ecosystem. Let me also say that when we talk about STEM and education, we have a very big gender gap that we need to absolutely drastically reduce. In the STEM sector, we have today below 30% of women, and those that manage to find work are less paid than men, and they have more difficulty in making a career. Finally, there is no smart nation without a smart bureaucracy. So digitization also means to modernizing our digital services, but it implies an organizational and cultural change in public and private sector, really modernizing our administration and maybe hiring new people in the public service to help us do so. I finish by saying that it is time for Europe to really address this important question of the future, making sustainable and green digitization a great common project. And also it is right to propose our own model for technological sovereignty, a new digital humanism that guarantees full democratic participation of citizens while protecting citizen fundamental rights. So the solution that Europe should offer to the world is not a retreat back to a Cold War mentality, but is a new vision for a global and interconnected digital society operating according to democratically agreed rule and standards for sustainable digitization that benefit both people and the environment. And I hope that this vision can become the basis for the next generation EU. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Francesca. Very, very rich presentation. And I think that it follows Ilham's presentation also very well, because it gives us this idea of the systems thinking, right? Of the need to think about all the elements that are unfortunately all essential in order to make the future vision of the industrial strategy and the future growth model of the European Union work. And that is the very complicated aspect that really gave us some headaches when we were designing the Industrial Policy Task Force, right? There is, it's very difficult to isolate specific elements without thinking about the working of the whole system. So from policy coherence, it's to the external dimension that has been raised by many of the comments that we're receiving in the Q&A, and the real meaning of the technological sovereignty and strategic autonomy. And in all this, I was wondering whether Montserrat thinks that in this system thinking, workers are like an add-on, an optional element, or they are treated as an integral part, and whether you think just transition is being defined with the right level of ambition. Is this like a compensation mechanism? Is this a structural effort towards transitioning workers towards new skills and new jobs? How do you see it? So your 10 minutes start now.
Thank you. I think that is not a question that if we need to be added. I think that workers are an essential part of the transformation. Without workers will be impossible. Without workers' commitment will be impossible to do the change, no? But I think that the European industry is facing three major challenges: the fight against climate change, the transition to a digital economy, and the recovery from COVID. These three angles are the ones who are impacting strongly in the strategy. And of course, we think from the worker side that in some moment will need to be updated, because I think that all the strategy was produced in a moment that was not we were not in the actual situation. For that reason, we will need to be in an ongoing process of updating, because the situation that we are is not fixed, and we will need to move on this. On climate change, the scientists have said very clear that the recommendations from the IPCC report to keep global warming below 1.5 or if we don't do that, we will be addressed to a terrible situation. There are a lot of experts that they are saying that the COVID is like if you put the finger, as the economy says, in the advancing very fast, and you will see in few months what will happen with the climate crisis. But the scale and speed of the transition is unprecedented and will require profound changes in EU industries. This is especially true for the energy sector, the energy intensive industries such as steel, cement, chemicals, glass, etc. I must say that the Just Transition Center, for example, is organizing different roundtables with the main sectors, because we like the view that this time the strategy offers as the world value change. But of course, there is an impact on sectors, and we are preparing also those sectors to be decarbonized with their intervention, with the workers' intervention. And at the moment, we have organized one with the Swedish colleagues on the steel and cement sectors on how to do the transition, because of course the phase out coal is important, and we are very involved in this transformation on how we move workers from the coal sector to others. And we have the two big examples on how workers' involvement and the capacity to negotiate and to put the social dialogue at the center, like in Germany or in Spain, have produced fruitful results, as the phase out coal agreement in Spain and the phase out coal agreement in Germany. For that reason, in parallel to that, the EU industry will require to make a digital transition that necessitates massive investment in new infrastructures and in deeply that deeply modifies the way European industries function and operate, the organization of work as well as the qualifications that was mentioned before and skills require dramatically change. But we need to anticipate, because if not, we are seeing that, for example, the Paris Agreement have said that we need to isolate and to adapt our buildings to the Paris Agreement request to be aligned with the Paris Agreement request, but we are not preparing the workers of the construction sector to do this job. And we are delayed already. We are delayed because that was announced 5 years ago, and at the moment we don't have the skills and we don't have the task force ready to do this transformation. I also want to say that this transition will need to be properly managed to ensure that EU industry remains and reallocates to Europe, creates quality jobs and strengthens its global competitiveness. And finally, I want to say that the lockdown and containment measures put in place in most countries to halt the COVID outbreak had a huge adverse impact on different industry sectors and on the EU economy. Indeed, many companies and workers stopped, drastically reduced their activities, and the demand for goods and services has fallen in many sectors. This has led to a massive restructuring process. In some countries well organized with the regulation and with the involvement of all actors, in others not exactly. But what I must say is that precarious workers have been particularly affected by these circumstances. This strategy should enable European industry to achieve a climate neutral and circular economy. Circular economy have been mentioned by several of the speakers, and the trade union movement and what we as a Just Transition Center we see is we need to prestigiate the jobs in the circular economy. The best way is to offer good, reskill the people, to implement all the technologies that make more easy these jobs, because if we don't offer good salaries, the circular economy, as we understood, will not attract the youth that they need to be involved in these new jobs, because they consider that those jobs are well paid, they don't have any prestige at social level, and they don't have the capacity to provide them a good life. No, I also want to say that the strategy should put an end to offshoring practices and social dumping in order to create and maintain quality jobs in Europe. It's not a question of protectionism, it's a question, if we want to have a clear strategy at European level, we need to define who produce what and where we produce, in which level of employment is created in the different parts of Europe. I want also to remark that there are key messages in the strategy, but one of the more important is the need of massive investment to do all this transformation, especially in infrastructures and breakout technologies, as well the strong support for public services and education. Such investments will be key to allow the industry to thrive, and also will be crucial to protect and support the European industry, the potential of the European industry. How to finance also this industrial strategy, will be necessary not only to have a strong budget, but also to adopt measures on fair taxation. We don't have a clear picture on the tax system that depends on the national scope, but we will need to articulate if we want to align the European strategy with the fair taxation for all Europeans. Because the new industrial strategy for Europe will need to rely on sufficient investments and funding, an ambitious MFF, as well as fair, effective taxation systems. Regarding to the Green Deal, for example, will be very good to adapt these attractive incentives with the taxation systems, because the Green Deal offers the possibility to have also have jobs and also goods produced in this framework, and we will need to adapt to the taxation. Also, the strengths, employment, and strategic value chains in the EU that helps achieve the European Green Deal objectives. The new industrial strategy with the Circular Economy Action Plan should be the cornerstone of the EU climate action and provide the necessary policy and financial tools for the European industry. The other question is if the digitalization will benefit workers, no? If the EU industry that is fair and benefits equally enterprise and workers, because COVID-19 has exacerbated the digital transformation of business and work. The industrial strategy should address the challenges of digitalization at work and improve the protection, employability, and well-being of workers. We have identified during this crisis that not in each country, not in each region, citizens and workers have the same opportunities and the same possibilities to do homework or to digitalize their working places, and that will be very important to invest in the different resources and the different tools to achieve this question. And at the end, also, I want to remark that digitalization will have a strong impact on the world of work, will transform all. And I am very happy that in this strategy, there is a clear reference, for example, on the platform workers, that, as you know, there is a European debate, there is a European action in the tribunals, and there are already some decisions in the tribunals that they consider the platform workers as normal workers. They are not self-employees. They are not, because one of the main I don't know, criticism that we can offer or we can comment based on the proposal of the Commission is that we don't see that there is a clear indication to strengthen the value of the work, the necessity to have a social dialogue, and to strengthen the collective bargaining, because we have seen in sectors, in countries, when this architecture is well performed, there are more good results for workers and for the industry. For that reason, the positive is that the platform workers, as part of this digitalization, they will have a consideration in this industrial strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Montserrat. I think we had these first three interventions, and meanwhile, you probably have seen that there are many common elements between these interventions. My reading of this is that we see different stakeholders in Europe ready to join forces and to row in the same direction. They obviously require coherence. They require attention towards distributional impacts. I mean, there has to be fair return and consideration of all the elements of this emerging system. There has to be also a growing attention towards the level playing field, meaning Europe cannot go it alone, even if it really squares the very difficult circle of how to combine all the different interests and relaunch its industry. This is not going to be sufficient unless there is an external action of the EU that is compatible with this, so that this emerging system can thrive alongside with the others. And this is something that has been mentioned both by Ilham in her speech, has been mentioned by Francesca more on the technology side, has been mentioned by Montserrat as well, both in internal fairness in the organization of production and also in the external fairness in terms of the level playing field. We have a number of questions for you and we are also running late. So I would ask you for an additional effort there to ask you whether you have very short comments to some of the questions that we received in the Q&A. One is a very important question asked by Joel on how to avoid retro-industrial policy, meaning is there the risk of erring on the side of protectionism, and how do we avoid this? Is a way, that Leander was asking, to focus on analyzing and assessing the impact of new products from the standpoint of productivity, but also from the standpoint of sustainability. For example, is the taxonomy, this is not part of this question, but is the taxonomy a good instrument in this respect? We had questions on that are more on the side of Montserrat, I would say, meaning what kind of inequality we will be generated by the post-pandemic recovery, or what is the risk of inequality? Is this within sectors, as you mentioned? Is this between countries as well? Ignacio asked that question mostly for you. There are several comments on the Capital Markets Union and the absence of a complete and adequately, organized and flexible capital markets union that would support innovation. There are, but I would probably leave this for the intervention by Celine later. Questions by Massimo on the SME liquidity crisis, and for Francesca, Alessandra was asking whether the technological sovereignty is something that she sees also oriented towards aerospace and defense as a critical sector of the economy. So there's a lot of comments there. I might go back to Ilham to see whether she has any specific addition to these questions that have been asked in our Q&A section. And sorry for cutting corners for the people that are asking questions. that try to really give value to the fact that you're participating in the discussion. So Ilham, I don't know if you have you want to pick any of those specifically.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can hear me. A lot of good questions. Well, listen, I think it's a great opportunity for Europe on the capital markets. It's a good point. I think maybe Brexit should create a momentum right there in a way. And more than just capital markets is also about the energy policies, building the framework. We as companies, we can do that much. We can play our part in having a vision and having sustainability, circularity, green deals embedded in our strategy. And you see many leaders, we believe in it, we are doing it. The ERT even working on the KPIs Kirsten was talking about. So we have a proposal for the EU. But I think going beyond, we need a framework. And this is why the EU has a greater role to play. I applaud that Europe has mobilized resources immediately as compared to 08 or 09. I'm a generation of leaders who lived 08 or 09, 9/11 and few epidemic, you know, in my career. But I applaud that they mobilized quickly the resources and injected the money. But now it's about injecting it with quality, right? With quality in the right technologies, in not localizing, you know, commodities, but rather bringing the breakthrough technologies we were talking about, right? And also creating that level playing field, because we still belong to a global world. Although we localize jobs and localize technologies, you need absolutely to ensure that you have a fair, competitive, level playing field. If not, it's gonna die sooner or later. So that's number one. Number two,
which I have to ask
key.
you to be very short on.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Technology is key. We talked a lot about digitalization. It's an enabler for a lot of industries to cut the waste, to make the invisible visible. And we need the new skills in our businesses, in our industries. So now comes the time to make it accessible for all, and Europe has a catch-up to play. And more than ever, I think the EU has a great opportunity to step up as compared to the Americas or China and China alliance, as we've seen now, to create that multipolar, you know, balanced world and become a beacon of prosperous, profitable, and green technology hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilham. Francesca, please help me keep the time, because otherwise we'll be running very late. But
yeah,
you want to answer one of those questions? Yeah.
I mean, I think I can be very brief, actually. So in the question, the relationship between technological sovereignty and defense, well, just gonna say that obviously also in the commissioner's world is very clear that technological sovereignty will help us to lay the foundation. I mean, there are critical building blocks, critical infrastructures that will be at the core of the industries of the future in this kind of idea of the ecosystem and the metrics of the value chain, then you will have the kind of critical sectors. I mean, aerospace, we know, is one absolutely important in Europe. Actually, there is dedicated funds. Even in Italy, we have a national dedicated fund in aerospace, and as National Innovation Fund, we are investing in aerospace, not only for big companies, but also startups. We have some very interesting ones that are contributing in building that. And then, of course, cybersecurity and defense, which is something that the commissioner is working a lot on. Then let me say that also for protectionism, non-protectionism, I think we also have to realize how different is the geopolitical context today and how we are seeing, I mean, I said it in my speech, you know, if you look at some of the interventions from the US government and the Chinese government's tech bans, sanctions, I mean, intervention in really redefining, for example, the chip value chain and so on, I think we have to be realistic. So on one side, I think we also have to step up and make sure that our companies have the capacity to compete. We really need to rebuild this industrial base, starting from the critical infrastructures of the future. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to impose our rules and our standards and our values to this digital world. So if we want the digital world to become more European, then we also have to do that. And at the same time, I think the commissioner was very clear, and I finish here, that you want FDI, so you want for direct investments in Europe, but also with increased control, so that on equal footings for our European companies that will be able to compete. I think this also then links to what Montserrat was saying about, you know, good jobs and making sure that we have good salaries, that the competition is on the high level of productivity and technological innovation, and not on social dumping and a low wage. And let me just finish by saying, I think it is absolutely critical to stress the importance of coordinated investments, public and private, and new models for financing, both the industrial strategy, but also new startups and so on. But at the same time, we need to build capabilities, entrepreneurial capabilities, organizational capabilities in the public sector, this is very clear, and also in the private sector. So we need also this kind of entrepreneurial strategy if we want to be competitive in the future. And I think this is important. It's not only about financing, although it is absolutely a very important point.
Thanks, Francesca. I would keep all of you talking forever, but unfortunately I have to keep the time. So Montse, please help me on that side as well. If you have received one question you want to comment on, please do that as concisely as possible. Yeah, you're muted, Montserrat.
You told me that was about, I cannot see the question now, but it was about sectors, no? Which sectors will be more impacted? Huh?
Inequality between sectors and also across countries potentially. But
yeah, of course, one of the key elements of the Green Deal and all European strategies must have as objective to reduce inequalities, because this is not the model. The model that we want is not a model based on low and down. We want to use the opportunity of this crisis to have more and better jobs and working conditions for all workers. For that reason, it's very important, as you say, Andrea, the concept of just transition, because it includes all that we think that must be the process. And the other word is anticipation. As I say before, we will have opportunities for the new sectors, and also we will have opportunities of good jobs in the reshaped sectors. Because of course, I'm very happy that, for example, in Sweden, they are already preparing just transition plans for all the parts of the industry. That will need to be the roadmap and the indication for all European countries. It's not like this. There are countries that they think that coal is forever. Is not the case of the majority, and they are also sectors that they need a huge number of investments to do the transformation. Another key element for us is the social protection systems. You need to have bridge systems that reallocate the workers, the elderly ones, to early retirement systems, especially the miners, for example, in the industries related to the miners. But you need also also to prepare those workers for the future with good skills. And we are not doing that. We are not linked the education and the reskilling of the workers with the new competences. For example, on the renewables, we are working very hard with different unions, because the renewables will be a good place to work. But we need to organize those workers, because if not, the ones that have a good job in a polluter sector, they don't want to move to this sector, because it's not as well paid and it's not as well recognized in terms of working conditions. That is very important. There are sectors that will suffer a huge transformation. And in this COVID crisis, we have learned about the agriculture and the industry related to the agriculture systems. We will need to empower those workers, and we will need to change and transform the sectors. And of course, the transport and all the industries linked to the transport, electrification, blah, 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 blah. I hope that I have answered the question. Thank you.
Yes, Montserrat, you did. And we carry these insights also from our first three speakers into the work of the working groups. I will now move on to our other speakers, starting from Andrew. And Andrew, does it really work? Meaning, is the strategy, as an expert in the circular economy, is the strategy circular also in the sense that everything holds together? Meaning that, is it too ambitious, or is it wishful thinking? What are your impressions?
Well, I think the comments that were made by Kirsten were really very encouraging, because I think that what we have set out to do with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation from the outset was really to focus on this whole topic of systems change and move from a narrative and an approach that was to encourage systems thinking to one that encouraged new approaches for systems transformation. And you know, the need to focus on systems is really crucial. And I think that the comments that she made also about the tools that are needed for systems transformation, focus on finance, regulatory, the value chain and the economics across the value chain, and the networks for delivery of the transformation. All of this needs to occur within the context of a more resilient, distributed, diverse, and inclusive economy. And that transformation is a very major transformation. But what we're trying to focus on in the first instance is the design of the new product service system solutions that can scale rapidly and start to demonstrate better industrial solutions, innovation in the industrial space for better solutions, and consider those in the broader transformation. So you need to work the problem at multiple levels. You can't solve it all at once because it is incredibly complex. You've got to find a way into the complex system. You've got to simplify it down to, you know, subsets where we can start to work differently on a new approach for alliances that bring together the value chain, the ecosystems, start to look at the different roles of the actors in those systems, understand the end-to-end implications and flows of materials and value across the value chain and ecosystem, looking not only at the positive value creation potential and the positive ecosystem, the natural system benefits, you know, lowering pollution, lowering energy demand, lowering system leakage, looking at how we can in fact embed regeneration of natural systems as a byproduct of industrial activity. And I think it's really important that we make the distinction between sustainability measurement and sustainability impact that reduces the harm of linear economic activity, compared to the rethinking of systems that embed better benefits and outcomes through the redesign of business models and the system in total. It's really important, because if we don't appreciate that, we can have significant unforeseen consequences. If we, in looking at the digital agenda and Francesca's comments, I agree with much of what she's saying, but I think that one of the important things that's missing in that narrative is how we orient the development of new digital economic opportunities in a way that doesn't just accelerate linear economic activity, but it actually enables more circular economic activity. So we're doing two things at once. One, we're creating a better digital ecosystem for Europe, but we're also orienting that very deliberately towards innovation for circular economic thinking and outcomes. And again, it's not just the way we deal with waste and material flows as a at the end of the pipeline, at post-use, but applying digital to information services that allow us to understand better ecosystem value chains, allow us to better understand material flows, where things are, what's in them, how we can recover them, how we can repair them. So those information services and the Internet of Things tagging, connecting information to materials, super important. So that's, and it's all about the upstream innovation, and the design agenda is absolutely critical. How we actually build skills in designers to be able to understand that it's not just about better product design, but it's products and services powered by information, and it's systems powered by information, transparency and digital. So these things are all interconnected, and the learning agenda that goes with this is huge, because we have to inform designers, we have to find new approaches and ways of working to bring the various actors in the ecosystem and across value chains, and frankly within companies, together to be able to think about these new product service systems in context of the broader societal policy changes that are needed, the learning agendas that are needed, etc. So it is a big transformation. It has to be driven and guided by the principles and a vision that's very clearly about an economy that is designing out waste and pollution, keeping materials in use and regenerating natural systems. And I would come back to also to one of the points that Yanis made earlier, which was really about this messages and actually the messaging of the need for rapid growth, the need for finding growth on the one hand, the need for affordable products on the other hand, as a tension between how we actually also think about the circular economy, the production and consumption system transformation that's needed, that releases the value and contributes to both growth and climate and biodiversity as an inherent byproduct of industrial activity, not an afterthought. So that's the problem space that we have to actually focus on, and we have to find very clear demonstrations. And I'm hugely encouraged by Kirsten's approach and focusing on these alliances, looking at sector alliances. We're looking very closely at plastics, fashion, and food. These are not just European challenges, they're global challenges. So, the ability to, and importance of Europe actually being a leader in setting global standards as well will be, shouldn't be underestimated, because the environmental challenges of climate and biodiversity are global challenges as much as they are, very important local challenges that need to be addressed through local policies, particularly as we start to look at food and land use practices.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Yeah, I think we very much are aligned in this respect. And I also was deeply encouraged by the way in which Kirsten presented the way in which they want to approach this. And I will, there's a number of questions that I have for you. I would encourage also all the speakers to go into the Q&A section, because you will find some questions that you can answer live directly, also because we're going to be short of time at the panel at the end of these three speeches. So I move to Celine. And also maybe with a bridge from Andrew's presentation, meaning is the OECD looking at SMEs with the same type of approach under the more systemic approach, or you are adopting a more specific view of the specific problem of SMEs? So Celine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Andrea, for the opportunity to actually go into a bit more details based on the high-level remarks we provided at the beginning. Yes, indeed, we are very much aligned with the system approach that DG Kirsten Jona presented earlier. The starting point is really the fact that traditionally industrial policy has been very much focused on large firms and national champions. However, everybody realizes that the challenges that we face due to megatrends, including climate change, digitalization, and even more recently, the COVID-19 crisis, mean that today's industrial policy needs to be a bit more SME focused. And that's, as part of a system approach like the European Commission is taking. And why are we focusing so much on, the SME lens at the OECD? It's because the transformation that is required is actually most challenging among smaller firms. And not only they are the ones that struggle with it and needs to be, reformed or taken forward, but also because they in fine constitute 99% of the firms and 50 to 60% of the value added. So they really constitute the fabric of economies and of society's employment that needs to be transformed. So let me take maybe a couple of illustrations from the priorities for the EU industrial policy that were highlighted by Commissioner Thierry Breton to illustrate that critical importance of refocusing and accounting for SMEs. If you start with the green transition, for example, the reality is that SMEs produce some 60 to 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's really hard to see how the EU can achieve its 55% emission reduction target and carbon neutrality objective should it fail to actually significantly change SMEs' emission performance. If you take now the digital transformation, of course, the successful transition to a digital economy critically hinges on the security of and the trust in IT. And it is an area where the system is as strong as its weakest link. However, we all know that the digital transformation has drastically increased SME exposure and vulnerability to the digital security risk, and that compared to bigger firms, they have weaknesses in terms of their risk management practices. And if you look through recent surveys and evidence, you will see that the weaknesses of smaller suppliers can expose entire value chains. For example, a recent survey shows that 80% of more than 1,500 companies worldwide have suffered a breach via their supply chain. So addressing the SME part of those supply chain is critical for the digital transformation. And finally, if you look at the COVID-19 crisis itself, it really provides an example of the vulnerability of SMEs and the critical importance to the resilience of the economy. Just to mention two facts. First, SMEs represent close to 75% of all jobs in the most affected sectors, and that compares to 60% of their contribution to the total business economy. So they were significantly more impacted. And then if you look across the world, based on 100 more business surveys, at the outset of the crisis, 50% of these SMEs were at risk of being put out of business in less than 3 months. So they were critical to the economic resilience of our countries. So that's why, in our view, the Build Back Better and the current reflection of the EU on the EU industrial policy provide a great opportunity to put SMEs back to center stage. And in the rest of my intervention, I'll try to address a couple of challenges and the how. First, I mentioned earlier that policies need to pay attention to the fact that businesses, generally speaking, but SMEs in particular, are highly diverse. They are the highly performing and innovative businesses and the front runners, but that's only 2% of the enterprise population. There's the peloton as well, and there's the more lagging firms. And if you look at what happened with the COVID crisis, all groups, all of the three groups have been actually hit hard by the crisis, and they share common vulnerabilities. However, if you look at the details, some were really quicker at adapting and capturing opportunities than others. And that depended on a range of factors, sectors, motivations, location, key features of the entrepreneurs. So taking that into account, policies across sectors need to become more refined and granular in their understanding of business behaviors. And this is really an area where the OECD is developing tools and typologies to avoid the blanket approach to policies and try and provide more tailor-made support for different populations of businesses. Second, the crisis has compounded a key challenge facing SMEs in their dual green and digital transitions, which is their level of debt and insolvency risk. And that's a question that was also raised in the chat, actually. So on that, we document this specific challenge faced by SMEs owing to the liquidity crisis in the special edition of the OECD SME Finances Scoreboard that we are actually launching today in parallel to that session in the EU SME Assembly. What we can tell is that, and what we've seen, is that many SMEs have coped with the crisis by taking on more debt, and usually with government support. But there's a dual risk coming with this trend. One, the current liquidity crisis may lead to a solvency crisis, and we do expect the number of bankruptcies to rise in 2021. But second, and that's very crippling in the medium term, we anticipate that this heavy borrowing will affect the capacity of SMEs to undertake the necessary transition to greener and more digital practices. And so looking ahead, policies supporting the industrial strategy and the green and digital transition should not increase the debt burden of SMEs. In addition, we believe that the funding needs to become a bit more conditional and focused on supporting the green and digital transformation. It should promote the entry of new and innovative businesses. Third, obviously the crisis has re-emphasized, if need be, the importance of SME digitalization. It has prompted policymakers to focus on narrowing the gap in the adoption of digital tools and technologies between small and large firms, which we know is very important. And again, bringing the peloton back into the fold and giving them access to digital tools will be critical if we're serious about the digital transformation in the EU. What we've seen with the crisis is, interestingly, is that it has created opportunities for smaller businesses in areas like telemedicine, remote personal care, home delivery, online education, you name it, among a few. But the key question now for us is, how do we lever these opportunities and not go back to normal once the crisis, fingers crossed, is over? So we are at the OECD keeping track of firms adapting and taking advantage of these new opportunities through a multi-stakeholder initiative called the Digital for SME. And we believe this is what is needed going forward, and very much in line with the alliances mentioned earlier in the discussion. We think we need a broad-based agreement among governments, big and small businesses, research and academic communities to foster a digital pact that would support the ambitious policy objectives of significantly boosting SMEs and startups' access to digital technologies in the coming years. It's not only one actor that can fix that. Fourth, we believe that the crisis has shown, and it is in line with several interventions before mine, has shown the importance of startup policy. If you go back before the COVID-19 crisis, the startups and young firms less than 5 years old created more or less 40% of new jobs in OECD countries. With the crisis, especially at the beginning, the dynamics has largely collapsed. And many initial responses to the COVID-19 rightly focused on supporting incumbents at a time when the main perceived risk was liquidity shortages and massive layoff. And so at the onset of the pandemic, entry rates dropped sharply, raising the specter of a lost generation of companies. It is true that if you look at the trends, the startup rates picked up again over the summer because of the easing in some of the restrictions, some of the support provided by governments. But to be honest, I mean, a big part of this increase was also driven by necessity-driven entrepreneurship as people entered self-employment to cope with the lack of alternative in the job market. And so looking ahead, what is needed now for the recovery is a more innovative entrepreneurship. New entries of innovative firms are critical to driving up the aggregate productivity levels and in bringing green and other innovations to the economy. However, we know these firms face difficult short-term conditions, including a severe lack of risk capital. So now it's time for what we call a renewal strategy that strengthens small firm productivity and innovation, rather than a replacement strategy that repeats the low SME productivity rates of the past. And for us, it means promoting entrepreneurship as a positive choice and not only a negative one, investing in business leadership, management, and digital skills, and it was mentioned earlier as well, and creating and expanding the network of entrepreneurs to promote peer learning. It also means an opportunity to support businesses that are innovative, green, and with a positive social mission and may face problems entering the market. And let me actually finish on that note. Entrepreneurs depend very much on the entrepreneurial ecosystems in which they are embedded for their networks, their access to finance, their talent, and their markets. And this is a very much welcome development of the EU approach to focus on these entrepreneurial ecosystems that we heard very much in the intervention of Commissioner Thierry Breton. Because we know that SMEs and entrepreneurs are heavily shaped by the framework conditions set by national policies, such as regulations, taxation, finance, knowledge diffusion, and so on. But we also know that regional conditions are vital. And these conditions vary strongly. This is clearly illustrated by regional variations in rates of business creations, which are often double in the most successful entrepreneurial regions than in the lagging ones. And finding the weak links and the enablers in the entrepreneurial ecosystems requires going beyond the EU, even going beyond the national level to the regional level, and involving the local public and private actors for their support. So I'll end here, and let me finish by thanking again very much SEPS for this invitation and welcome the initiative of the task force. In our view, this is an opportunity to revisit the way we see the role of small businesses in the drastic industrial transformation ahead of us and related policies. So well done, and we look forward to seeing the results of that task force.
Thank you, Celine. And I think we will not let you wait for the results. We actually will involve you before that in the work of the different working groups. We are, again, behind schedule, so I will immediately move to Janez Potočnik for his speech. Thanks, Janez, for the patience, and over to you for your presentation. I think you have slides, right? You are the only speaker who has slides, so I think you should be able to share your screen and yes. Okay. Yes, we see them now.
You see them now, then it's fine. So if I start, this is a kind of contribution to the things which everybody was talking during this session, think system and think transformation. If I start from, just a second, I think I have to repeat it because it's going. So you will remember that in the State of Union address, the van der Leyen, the president of the Commission, actually mentioned systemic modernization across our country, society, and industry as needed. And she basically said our current level of consumption of raw materials, energy, water, food, and land use are not sustainable. So we need to change how we treat nature, how we produce and consume, live and work, eat and heat, travel and transport. It's actually an investment plan for Europe. Let me try to explain very quickly why I see the importance of resource management so critical for the competitiveness. Natural resources are a kind of bridge between economy and competitiveness on one hand, and climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and health implications on the other. According to raw materials scoreboard of the European Commission, European Union was just 2 years ago between 75 and 100% reliant on imports for most metals, and more than half of EU's energy needs are met by net imports. As you know, prices of raw materials are extremely volatile, and the resources constitute far largest share of industry input costs. And according to UNEP IRP, which I'm co-chairing, resource extraction and processing is responsible for 90% of global land-related biodiversity loss and water stress, 50% of the global climate change impacts, and even 1/3 of the air pollution health impacts. So building a clear and circular economy promises to reduce our dependence on imported materials, lower our environmental, climate, and health impacts, and create more local jobs. It can also help improve self-sufficiency and resilience exposed by COVID-19 in relation to the global supply chains. In short, to improve European competitiveness, the focus should be on decoupling economic growth and well-being from natural resource use through redefining our economic model and by applying new technological developments and digitalization. Just a few days ago, Club of Rome and Systemic have released so-called System Change Compass, implementing European Green Deal in time of recovery. What we claim is that the ambition of Green Deal is high, it is clearly setting the right targets, it is acknowledging the need for just transition, and it is strongly interlinked and mutually reinforcing policy recommendations are present there. But we do believe that implementation is uncertain. Why? It does not sufficiently address drivers and pressures that cause environmental damage. It does not offer enough systemic perspective to guide decision-making. And of course, implementation is also put at extra risk due to COVID-19. So we are proposing the System Change Compass, which should guide us, which maps and envisions the systems in service of people and planet, which derives system-level orientations towards desired state, and which charts the pathways towards prosperity and well-being within the planetary boundaries. Very quickly, so it is based on natural resource optics, and I have clearly explained before why that is important. Very quickly, explaining you the logic. So we have designed 10 system change needed compass orientations. I will explain that a bit in detail later. We have connected that to 30 policy level orientations which are linked to these 10 principles, which creates a kind of overarching system. Then we moved from an abstract system to the economic ecosystems, which everybody is talking about. We have designed their 3 to 5 ecosystem level orientations. And finally, we call them champions, but it's actually the future development opportunities. We have also designed major economic development opportunities which are in line with the thinking which I have presented before. So about the system changing, what we think should be redefined. Prosperity. We should embrace social fairness for real prosperity. Redefining natural resource use, prosperity decoupled from natural resource use. Redefining progress, meeting societal needs as a purpose of a model based on economic ecosystems. Redefining matrix, performance measurement should be updated. Redefining competitiveness, resource optimization through digitalization at the heart of European competitiveness. Redefining incentives, show the real value of social and natural capital. Redefining consumption from owing to using. Redefining finance, the facilitator of the transition. Redefining governance, a systemic approach to governance influenced by science. And finally, redefining leadership, intergenerational agreement through a new forms of leadership. All in circle, because all should be actually approached simultaneously. Nothing is coming first or second. For each of them, and I'm showing you only example of the first, we have identified clear system level level policy orientations. For redefining prosperity, we claim that we should balance policy attention from income and wealth creation, which is currently the focus, to also income and wealth distribution, and ensure that economic transition contributes to equality and social fairness by guaranteeing universal basic services and minimum levels of income. That we should create conditions for social acceptance of the necessary transition, which should definitely be focused also on full cost, which would be introduced in all economic systems. So the vulnerable groups should be able to absorb the transition. And finally, we are also advising that we should replace part of the income-based taxes with resource-based taxes to address resource as well as social policy targets. Then from this abstract world, we have moved to the economic ecosystems, but we are proposing only 8, 4 which are related to resource-intensive human needs, nutrition, housing, mobility, and the rest of the consumer goods. So everything we wear, computers, everything we use. And then 4, which are basically major supporting elements necessary that these economic ecosystems in delivery of societal needs could function appropriately: nature-based solutions, energy-based solutions, circular materials-based solutions, and innovation, which is in particularly focusing on digitalization, information, and processing. For each of them, we are proposing then 3 to 5 concrete ecosystem orientations. This is just the example for the intermodal mobility: reduce the need for motorized trips through, and then we are saying what, prioritize medium of transport that it's easiest to electrify and maximize utilization through, and so on. So I will not go into detail. I would just like that you get the full picture. Then finally, we are proposing 50 plus nascent industrial development opportunities, which are in line with that ecosystem logic and with the compass approach in the healthy food, in built environment, in intermodal mobility, in consumer goods, in nature-based solutions, in energy solutions, in circular materials, and information and processing. All that are pretty much aligned with what R&I is thinking about future European partnerships. Our approach is more demand also based, while the Commission was leaving out the demand story, which I think it's not right. But of course, Commission is addressing also the health implications and others, which we are not, because they are not so much resource intensive needs related. If I summarize, so we have the compass, 10 compass redefines needed, 8 economic ecosystems, then the champions which are linked to that. And for the compass, we are proposing for each compass orientation 3 system level political orientations, 13 total. For each economic ecosystem, 3 to 5 economic ecosystem level orientations, and detailed explanation. While some of the development opportunities are present, it's also there. So this is very, very much in line with what would be needed with future renovation wave, which Commission is talking about, as also with the industrial policy you are talking about. To conclude, in summary, there are 5 key messages. First, European Green Deal, it's an inspiring vision for Europe's future. The vision is clear and largely agreed, but the pathways to achieve this vision are not clear. Coronavirus recovery and achieving European Green Deal are 2 sides of the same coin. To achieve the Green Deal objectives and the recover from the pandemic, we must address the drivers of natural resource use that cause that worrying environmental and health consequences. 10 principles are the core of the compass. They address how we think about prosperity and progress, the matrix we use to measure success, the way we govern and lead the transition to a sustainable future, and the enabling role of finance. 4th, economic activity should be reconsidered as economic ecosystems, ecosystems that are addressed through resource lenses and do not just produce wealth and prosperity, but rather deliver societal needs and human well-being. And finally, within each economic ecosystem, the compass directs us to a total of 50 plus subsystems that represent the scalable, sustainable industries that can grow into an economic and industrial backbone of Europe in the 21st century. There has never been a better moment for Europe to move from the history of resource-driven imperialism into an era of responsible use of natural resources, mitigating its resource fragility and strengthening our preparedness and resilience. This would also clearly position Green Deal and give it a real historic and also strategic way. As Johann Wolfgang Goethe said nicely, knowing it's not enough, we must apply. Willing it's not enough, we must do. And if I end up with a question with Commissioner Thierry Breton in the opening, the real question is, do we have the courage to do what it takes? Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Yanis. You really brought together almost everything that has been said during this meeting. And so I'm very thankful for your ability also to develop and provide us with this very comprehensive view, and which is also a call to, at the same time, an action plan and a call to action. And I think that also Commissioner Breton will be extremely pleased of having been put in the same slide with Goethe and being quoted at this in such a resounding way. What I propose is that since we're running out of time, there are some questions in the Q&A that are left open. I would ask, as a final effort, our panelists to go through those questions by clicking on the Q&A button and see if you can answer live. One question is easy for Yanis. We've been asked whether you'll be willing to share the slides with the participants. And so it's up to you. You can type the answer or just nod if you wish, or say no, obviously. So if you're fine with this, we will distribute to the participants your very clear and very interesting slides. So we have half an hour left, and we have to respond to Yanis's call to action, which is the same that also Commissioner Breton expressed in his speech, and many of the other speakers. It is time to really dirty our hands into these principles, these directives, these ideas and these visions, and try to see in practice, how do we go about it with the right level of ambition? And this is something that we want to do as SEPS with the launch of the Industrial Policy Task Force. We will give a snapshot of what we want to do here, but obviously what the speakers have told us in this session already will change a little bit the way which we'll approach at least some of the working groups. I will ask my colleague Mallory Schaus to open up her video and maybe share the slide set so that we can go quickly through the presentation of the task force working groups. I will start immediately as the slides are being loaded and shared by just saying what is the mission that we've given ourselves. The first is something that goes very much in the direction of what has been said by many of the speakers. We know that in order to develop the post-pandemic recovery vision that is sustainable and resilient, we will need to adopt policies that are at once aimed at protecting the economy and society, preparing the economy and society, and transforming the business models. This has been said clearly by many of the speakers. We also need foresight, meaning by the time we implement this strategy, technology will have brought us potential new possibilities, and we need to make sure that, for example, in the reference that has been made to the Internet of Things by some of the speakers, that we place the actions that will be developed in that changing technological environment and context, which is something that at the same time creates challenges and opportunities because of the potential carbon footprint of data centers and the IoT as well, and also technologies such as deep learning, but at the same time, the outstanding potential of these technologies to give us solutions that are systemic. Our aim is also in the Industrial Policy Task Force to give some meaning to words that are very often repeated, but that in our opinion still have to be completely filled with meaning. Things like technological sovereignty, strategic autonomy. We need to make sure that we get those terms and those visions right. And what we plan to do in this respect, as you will see, we will break up from now on and for the next 3 months into 8 parallel working groups. We will put ourselves initially in listening mode. We want to have a real multi-stakeholder dialogue. We want to avoid the usual Brussels meetings where, and this is a very good example today, a lot of content, not necessarily illustrating what the industrial strategy is about, but really looking at how we can go about it. And we want to be concrete from day one, which is today. And I think we are being concrete thanks to our speakers and the participants' questions today. We want to bring good ideas from the outside. We are cooperating with a number of partners to develop good idea. We have no restrictions, competing task force, think tanks, other initiatives. We want to bring every idea that we think is valuable to the table. We want to also bring some ideas and some synergies with our other projects. So we, for example, are running a project on Europe's role in the global governance environment, which very much captures the external challenges that we've been summarizing today. And this project is called Trigger. We are also involved very extensively in a project on the socio-economic and behavioral impacts of COVID-19 called Periscope, which just started a few days ago. And it's the largest project funded by the Horizon 2020 program in the European Union for analyzing the social and economic impacts of the pandemic. We will also bring the ideas from our Hidden Treasures project, which looks at the way in which Europe can really leverage its own distinctive traits and really modernize its own original approach to innovation, to competitiveness, to sustainability, to really develop a model that is consistent with the past, but at the same time projected in the future. And we want to, and we are asking, not that this makes me particularly popular among my peers, but we will be asking to the chairs that you will see now taking turns in describing what they want to do, to develop a number of recommendations for the European Commission that is high enough for us to reach at least 100 recommendations to be, and 100 meaningful recommendations, obviously, to be tabled to the European Commission in the spring of 2021. We do believe that SEPS is uniquely positioned to do this. As you will see, our research units do many, many things and basically cover the whole range of research fields and subject matters that are needed in order to provide this comprehensive contribution. In order to do this, I will certainly be heavily involved, but the whole of SEPS, as I was saying, will be heavily involved. And in particular, a person that will be very heavily involved is Mallory. And I now give the floor to her to describe the structure and the timeline of this task force, and with one final footnote. While the speakers feel relieved that they came to the end of this very intense morning, we will still chase them to see whether they would be available to act as our own advisors as we develop our own ideas. And we're not going to put you to work, but I think we're so intellectually rewarded by your contributions that it would be really a waste not to at least keep you posted on what we do along the way. So Mallory, over to you to describe how we want to structure this task force, and again to the participants plead to consider participating actively in as many working groups as possible.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Andrea. I just want to add to what you have already said, so I will try to be as short as possible and also refer potential participants, but already the registered ones as well, to the brochure, which is online. So the task force consists of 8 different working groups that you see on your left on the screen, covering the main policy areas relating to EU's industrial policy. There will be 3 online meetings over 3 months for each working group, 1 meeting lasting from 1 to 2.5 days. The works of the working group are starting in December or January 2021, but will pay great attention to the agenda of the European Commission and adjust accordingly. The works are starting beginning of December with a general introductory meeting and the prospectus with the final topics of each working group. The dates of the meetings and the participants will be available at that time, but already beforehand we'll provide you with a substantive overview of the working groups with the contact details of the SEP staff members, in addition to what you are going to hear today by the different SEPS members. Each working group is composed of a chair, who is an expert steering the dialogue, rapporteurs, conducting the research, drafting the report with the chair, then advisors supporting the whole working group, potential sponsors defining some or all topics of a working group, and then the core, you, the task force members. And there, Andrea already mentioned the multi-stakeholder approach. So we pay great attention to a balanced representation of all interests. We would greatly appreciate an active participation by task force members, be it in input provided, but also the attendance to the meetings. The research is independent, strongly evidence-based, conducted by the rapporteurs and the chair. And each meeting will generally start with one or two keynote speakers coming from different horizons, but really experts in the topic discussed during the meeting. As Andrea already mentioned, each working group contributes one chapter to the final report of the whole task force with key policy recommendations. And at the final plenary session, which will take place either in March or April 2021, we will take stock of the results of the different working groups and will develop there a consolidated version of the policy recommendations of the different working groups. Now we turn to a substantive overview of the different working groups as part of the task force. I would invite all my colleagues to turn on their video. We start. So I'm moving the slides if it's possible. No. Okay. So now we are starting with Christian Egenhofer, Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Energy and Climate Program at CEPS for the European Green Deal Working Group. Christian, the floor is yours.
Mallory, thanks a lot for this. Commissioner Breton mentioned the response to the crisis as accelerator to the transformation. So we would like to take it up there, also using the pillars that are generally mentioned, the low carbon combined with the clean, local pollution-free and the circular element. And in this context, we would like to, continue with the Green Deal priorities to take a comprehensive approach, as it was several times mentioned throughout this morning, by integrating the supply, energy, resources, and the material products. So therefore, picking both on the upstream and the downstream, or if you wish, supply and demand, as it was, for example, attempted in the hydrogen strategy. Now, the focus on the three working groups will be the first one, the features of the low carbon market. So what is it different? What makes these markets different? Capital intensity, circularity, alliances, we mentioned many. The second will be on the policy tools to make it happen. Carbon contracts for differences, green public procurement, product standards, eco-design, all we have heard before. And the third will then be really focusing on the construction value chain. That means the construction plus the retail sector, which incorporates really all the challenges and the opportunities in there. And one element will be, of course, accounting, as has been mentioned. Final point, there's a strong link, obviously, to strategic value chains, competition policy and state aid, obviously trade, digital, etc., etc. Mallory, I stop here, just hoping, looking forward that you join in these discussions and the work.
Thank you. Andrea Renda, in addition to being the director of the task force, is Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Grid Unit at STEPS. He is going to speak for the Digital Economy and Data Working Group and the Strategic Value Chain Working Group.
And I'm afraid also the competition policy one that comes next. On the digital economy and data, we take really the whole technology stack approach. We start from connectivity and in particular the prospects for the rollout of 5G, but also other forms of connectivity, for example, the low power networks. And we look at the options, we look at the science, we look at the concerns, we look at the opportunities, we look at the funding gaps and the potential alternative governance solutions that might speed up whenever appropriate the rollout of 5G in Europe. We will then move up in the technology stack into artificial intelligence and with specific emphasis on its impact on industry and sectors like manufacturing or automotive, energy, many others, and look at the way in which one can sustainably incorporate artificial intelligence technology into the industrial transformation, at the same time preserving the sustainability also from a social and environmental perspective, not only from an economic one. So we will have a dedicated section on this, and we will then broaden up to these emerging deepening of the technology stack, which is the so-called edge cloud layer, with increased decentralized architectures that, for example, Francesca has been referring to. The promise also in terms of environmental sustainability of having more distributed or decentralized architecture with decentralized data storage and artificial intelligence systems, the governance of data spaces, and the future of the federated cloud with the Gaia X project. So we really look at how the single market could be permeated by digital technologies in a way that serves all the purposes, the economic, the social and environmental, and adopts the governance, the courageous governance innovations, such as the ones that, for example, Francesca evoked before, in adopting in particular new arrangements for the governance of data spaces and their relationship with the edge and the cloud. This is it for my digital economy part. On the strategic value chains, we still have to confirm who will be the chair. So I'm stepping in because it depends very much on whether we will have arrangements to co-sponsor this working group. We are discussing with the two interested partners to really sponsor this working group, and this will really have consequences for the final content of the working group. We certainly want to look at identifying the strategic value chains. There's a lot to be discussed in terms of what are the ecosystems, what are the relationship to the data spaces, to the value chains, and is, for example, the approach that was proposed by Yanis something that is slightly different from the one proposed by the European Commission. Do they potentially, can they be reconciled? And what do they mean in terms of protection, preparation, and transformation of the economy? It's easy to protect one sector, and it's probably easier to transform that sector in the logic of the ecosystems. How does one do this? And at the same time, how does one organize fair distribution of value across the ecosystems and across the value chains? This is something that where we want to put the different concepts in the right order, and this is why this working group will be very, very cross-cutting and horizontal. That is also means discussing what does it mean in terms of strategic value chains to be strategically autonomous. Does it mean reshoring? Does it mean developing European alternatives? And what needs to be done in terms of really managing and transforming our value chains to combine strategic autonomy with resilience and sustainability. And finally, we will venture into the financing and the transparency along the value chains that can be enabled by new technologies. So we will look at a number of technological solutions. We do have an ongoing partnership with Ernst & Young, with EY, on looking at how the technological solutions could smoothen the functionings of the strategic value chains. I'll stop here. We'll come back for competition policy later.
Okay. So now we turn to Carolano, CEO of CEPS, who is going to share the Healthcare and Pharmaceuticals Working Group with Donald Kalf, a Dutch entrepreneur and publicist. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mallory, and thank you, Andrea. I think let me also from my side welcome this initiative. I think it's great, and also you see the attendance today, the interest today which we have is fantastic. Before I move into pharmaceuticals, let me say a brief word about why we are not addressing the issue of capital markets, because there were some comments about this from, for example, Ricardo Perisic in the Q&A. I think we know what the issue is, and I have just today published an article under the title Europe's Capital Markets Puzzle. What is the problem with Europe being incapable to provide the funds for investments? For example, BioNTech, the recent startup, which developed the vaccine against COVID together with Pfizer, is a European company, but went to the US capital market. And one of the key things which we miss in Europe is basically, and that we are saying since some time, but apparently we don't find a solution to that, is we don't have the base for deposits to be invested into performing funds, because most Europeans prefer to keep their deposits on a bank rather than to invest them, for example, in retail investment funds, which are then channeled into these kind of productive investment. But that we have addressed in many papers. We had a task force on this last year, basically feeding into what the Commission is doing on Capital Markets Union. And I just published a paper with a colleague today on what is the puzzle of Europe's Capital Markets Union, what are the different pieces which have to be put together to really provide this funding base for investments, for example, also in the domain of pharma, to become productive at a global level. But to speak about pharmaceutical sector, we have all heard, let's say, the speech of von der Leyen, which she in the State of the Union in the month of September, where she said, look, I want to have a European health union. We, with the subgroup which we'll have on pharmaceuticals and healthcare, will try to fill in what could this healthcare union or this health union of the EU be? What could be developed by the European Union in the coming months and years, let's say, to fill this in. But of course, the big problem which we have in this domain is that the EU formally doesn't have a competence. And we've seen it very well in the COVID crisis, that basically all what's being done in the domain of healthcare is done by the member states. And the EU has a problem to try to coordinate what the member states are doing. So what we'll do in the task force is address, first of all, look at healthcare systems in the EU. How do they compare? Where are the inefficiencies? What could we do much more efficiently? For example, in supplies to the healthcare sector, because also that is a big industry. We don't speak only about pharmaceutical industries, also the supplies to healthcare, of which there are also many European players involved. Then look at drug development. I mentioned BioNTech, but there are many others in the domain of drug development. How is it working? How long does it take to have a product on the market? How much time is there to the patient? And we're all aware about this now in the context of the COVID crisis. We're also looking at national research and development schemes, also link them with what the EU is doing and how well the coordination is functioning. And we know, let's say, that very often, let's say, it's still happening far too much at the national level. And what an industrial policy should orient at is making sure there's much more coordination between national R&D initiatives in the domain of pharmaceuticals and healthcare, and also in there, let's say, what role financial markets can play. Third issue is look at what is big pharma. I mean, if you speak about financial markets, capital markets today, the single biggest stocks left in the European capital markets are the pharma stocks. I mean, and of course, we speak about not only the EU, but Europe in general. We have seen many others disappearing or declining a lot in value, but big pharma remains extremely highly capitalized in Europe and are extremely important players and are extremely important employers also in European capital markets. However, what we are missing in the context of an industrial policy is an overview of how important is big pharma in Europe, how critical are they, how much is produced within Europe, how much is produced in other countries. We also know, for example, our dependence on producing generic pharmaceuticals from other countries like India and China. How true is this? We try to make a scorecard, let's say, of the strength of big pharma, the strength and the weaknesses of big pharma in Europe. And then finally, another issue we want to address, which the Commission is starting to address, is crisis management in the domain of healthcare. What can be done? How can the EU do it better? How can the EU coordinate its healthcare in crisis moments like this, let's say, which we have to do? What is the role of agencies like the European Disease Control Agency, the Chronic Disease Control Agency, or, for example, the role of the European Medicines Agency in the sector? So these are the 4 items which we want to address on our task force. as I said, let's say I'm not directly an expert in the domain of pharma, but I'm very happy that we have Donald Kalf, a Dutchman who's been very active in the sector involved for this, and who's already written for us on that subject in the context of the European Treasures Project, which also Mallory is leading.
So Andrea Renda for the Competition Policy and State Aids Working Group.
Yes, I will be very quick on this because otherwise we will run out of time. There we will look at the role of competition policy and its interface with industrial policy in many respects, in the traditional respects and angles of competition policy. We look at state aids and in particular for energy intensive industries, but more generally in what's going to happen and what should happen after in the sort of post-pandemic context, after the sort of the temporary suspension or the temporary regime for state aids will be faded out. And we look at mergers and acquisitions as a form of industrial policy with a question mark, meaning whether industry consolidation is a way to advance also in the direction of sustainability and resilience, or whether this is only a matter for some sectors and not others. For example, decentralized architectures being possible and more fragmented market structures with more smaller sized companies are possible also thanks to technology in a number of sectors, thereby discouraging or let's say making consolidation less attractive. And then we will look at dominance. Obviously, in the area of dominance, the Digital Markets Act that is coming up with new potential remedies and solutions for cases of market structure that is really conducive to concentration of power. The new competition tool is about to be presented by the European Commission. The Digital Markets Act is forthcoming in December this year. The rules of competition have been rewritten to make competition policy more oriented towards sustainability, resilience, and industrial competitiveness. And we will explore this under all the angles that typically competition law and state aids are about. So I'll hand over to Mallory again. Happy to have a numerous group in there.
So I'm turning now to the trade working group, which I'm sharing. So there I would propose to first discuss the interlink between trade and sustainability, assessed based on 3 different policy options. The EU bilateral trade agreements that are known to also contribute to the protection and promotion of EU standards. I refer notably to the trade and sustainable development chapters. I would then importantly focus on the carbon border adjustment mechanism to be established by the summer 2021. This is a joint topic with the Green Deal Working Group. And finally, under this first meeting, we would discuss the wider integration of international sustainability standards in EU trade legislation. So underlying this first meeting is actually the question of the extent to which those trade regulatory tools contribute to EU's overarching green transition, and this in a WTO consistent way. The second meeting would focus on the level playing field inside the single market. We would discuss the white paper on foreign subsidies and the FDI screening regulation, and underlying this second meeting is, of course, to find a balanced approach between protection, without falling into protectionism, and the DNA of the EU openness, investment, attractiveness. And then the third meeting would focus on EU trade relations at the bilateral, regional, and multilateral levels. We would, so what I propose, but it can still be discussed, we would then discuss the transatlantic relationship, its revival, a possible ambitious African free trade zone, and taking into account the need for a strong rules-based multilateral trading system as supported by the EU, we would focus and discuss on EU's contribution and role to the reform of the World Trade Organization. I give now the floor to Cynthia, LCD Director of Research, Senior Research Fellow and Head of the Economic Policy Unit at CEPS, as well as Sarah Bayoko, Research Fellow at CEPS for the Jobs and Skills Working Group. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, Mallory. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Many thanks, Mallory. Many thanks, Andrea, for organizing all this. We have heard from the Commissioner Breton speaking about creating quality jobs. A number of other speakers have also mentioned the importance of decent jobs, and Ilham specifically mentioned upskilling and reskilling as a key element for a number of companies. So we thought that the design and the implementation of a sensible EU industrial strategy cannot disregard what is happening on labor markets. This will also help to get a great social legitimacy, if you want, for a common strategy which is able to deliver. Now, I'm not telling you anything really new if I say that already before COVID, the labor markets were undergoing dramatic transformation, mostly driven by digitalization and the implementation of new technologies. We have been already experiencing destruction of jobs, creation of new jobs, and transformation in the way we work, in the way the workplace is set, and not least a dramatic evolution in the demand for skills. Now, the impact of COVID, at least the way we are seeing, has been quite dramatic in accelerating and amplifying all these transformations, which in some cases are making the transition not smooth but abrupt, and found many businesses, but also people unprepared. So it is against this background that we identified three main topics, which will be the focus of each of the three meetings of the working group on jobs and skills. As a first one, we would like to focus on really the understanding of the impact of COVID on the labor market, very much in the sense of looking at the job destruction, job creation across different sectors, look where opportunity is, and how a relocation of workers across occupations and across sectors can be achieved. The second meeting will be devoted to skills. Skills is probably the element of the labor market which is most directly relevant for the industrial policy. And here really the question is about who is the target, how different actors can interact in order to make sure that that people can provide the right skills for a successful industrial strategy. And then the first point, the last point, sorry, is really to focus on policies. It was mentioned by several of the speakers. We cannot look at the industrial strategy in isolation. We really need to look at the industrial strategy in combination with all the policies, and it's particularly relevant when we look at the labor market. The industrial policy, of course, alone cannot resolve all the problems in the labor market, but it's also quite clear that the labor market policies in the labor market actually can help industrial policies to be very successful. And here that there is a wide range of measures and actions that should be considered in order to make this possible. Of course, we're very much open to get on board additional issues and to discuss all of these aspects with all those of you who are interested. Thanks very much.
Now we turn to Giulia Meloni, Research Fellow at CEPS for the Agriculture and Food Working Group. The floor is yours, Giulia.
Thank you very much, and many thanks to Andrea and Mallory for organizing this very insightful event. Well, as highlighted previously by Commissioner Thierry Breton and Director General Kerstin Jorna, food, value chains, and biodiversity are really the key elements of the new industrial strategy and of the system approach. And this strategy has never been more timely because this year is really going to be critical for the agriculture and food sector that is already challenged by trade wars, price volatility, and COVID-19. I think there are really three key developments to watch closely in the coming months: the multi-annual financial framework, the implementation of the Farm to Fork strategy in 2021, and the reform of the CAP. So against this background, we propose to discuss the following topics. So the reform, the future of the Common Agricultural Policy, the future of the food policy, and the digitizing agri-food. As we know, for the future of the CAP, the new CAP proposed by the European Commission in 2018 called for a greater environmental and climate ambition through more result-oriented business models and the introduction of eco-schemes. And in the coming months, the Council and the European Parliament will negotiate their own positions to reach an agreement in the trilogues. So this is a very important momentum here as well. And for the Farm to Fork strategy and value chains, as stated by Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans, the biodiversity and Farm to Fork strategies are crucial for creating immediate business and investment opportunities so that we can restore the EU's economy as fast as possible. So to this end, the Farm to Fork strategy aims to deliver an integrated approach and to deliver a code of conduct in 2021. So we really believe that these issues are very important and will be discussed in all three meetings. We are very happy to have further potential participants and issues, and I'm really looking forward to chairing the workshop and the working group on agriculture and food. Thank you.
All right, so this completes the helicopter view of the different working groups. We've been 3 hours together. We still have quite a lot of participants connected. The only thing that is left to say for now is we encourage everyone to participate and get in touch with us. We want to have a choral debate, a collective and multi-stakeholder debate on all these issues. We will take, we will give the possibility to all the stakeholders and the would-be participants to express their interest in participating until the end of November. Then we will need to form the groups and start organizing the meetings. So we will not be able to expand the groups after that date. So there's still, say, almost 2 weeks to go. Please get in touch with us. We are in touch with many stakeholders, and we are already quite happy with the level of participation that we are seeing. Finally, I just want to summarize what we've seen today, meaning we've had Joaquin Almunia, we had Thierry Breton, we had Kerstin Jorna, we had 6 fantastic panelists discussing the future of the industrial policy strategy. We had several rounds of debate with different levels of participation, with different questions and answers, a lot of participation from the audience. We had the CEF seniors stepping in and the chairs of the different working group to illustrate what they want to do. As people normally say, the list is done, meaning that this is just the beginning. We need to do a lot more. We need to start now rolling our sleeves and go into the different working groups. We'll hope to find the same level of interest, enthusiasm, and participation in the coming weeks. It's going to be a long journey. I think we think that CEPS can do this. And we will want to deliver the best possible set of recommendations to the European Commission to be able to support EU institutions in this very ambitious strategy. So thanks, everybody. Thanks to everyone who's participated actively or passively to this event. And we will see you soon by providing you with updates on our next steps. Thanks a lot. Enjoy your lunch and see you very soon.